welcome to a brand new term and a brand new series of Fifth Gear. We won't be, as some BBC executives once suggested, seeing how big a boot is by filling it with ping-pong balls. Instead, when we're not buying bargains, we'll be having some fun and answering the questions no one else even asks. Like, can you make a Formula One car road legal? What's worse, driving when drunk or driving when tired? And could a boat beat a bike or a car?
We'll still be the home of your favourite thrash metal, plus we'll unleash the TIFF to flout the laws of physics. Tonight, we start the series with a bang by stopping with a crash.
Rubberneckers of the world rejoice, because tonight we're talking about crashes.
Now, the worst crash is a head-on crash. Picture this, you're driving along a country road, minding your own business,
When suddenly the car coming the opposite direction swerves.
straight into you, head-on.
It is a worst-case scenario, but it happens to someone, somewhere, every single day. But can you imagine what a car would actually go through in an accident like that?
The forces involved, the total, complete and utter destruction.
And what would be left if you drove into another car?
Head-on, both travelling at 60 miles an hour.
Yes, 60 miles an hour. Crash tests rarely offer a ringside seat to such high-speed carnage. Indeed, most happen at a more modest 30 to 40 miles an hour. But we're going to give you the chance to see what you normally don't.
It may not be very scientific, but I promise it will be spectacular.
So join us later in the show when Quentin and I will drive into each other at a closing speed of 120 miles an hour.
What's more, we will live to tell the tale, and it'll all be down to this very clever piece of red plastic pipe.
Things have been a little dull at Ford lately. Their recent launches include the fairly forgettable Fiesta, the rather futile Fusion, and a 6-speed gearbox for their diesel engine. Woo! So, Ford showrooms aren't exactly brimming with eye candy at the moment, but that could all soon change with this, the new street car. It's their baby convertible, based on the humble Ford Ka. It's styled in-house, but built by Pininfarina. Prices start at $12.5 grand, and it's on sale next month. And I think it looks pretty cute. But the big question is, has it got enough style to lift Ford's stodgy image? Well, we are in Cannes, where tax exiles and their multi-million-pound yachts are 2 a penny. And strangely, I don't feel too out of place in a tiny ragtop with a blue oval on the front of it. Now, there's a first. The chic drivers of Cannes, or Chigwell, might care to know that this is a charmingly entertaining car to drive. The new 1.6 94 bhp engine hits 60 miles an hour in a conservative 12 seconds. But any faster than that and people wouldn't be able to see you. And what's the point in that? It isn't a bona fide sports car, though. It's not called street for nothing. So don't expect it to be a rascal around the country lanes. Treat it more like a Gucci handbag. However, it isn't as well lined. The interior is pretty snazzy for a Ford, but it's still a bit kindergarten, and I can't quite see many burly blokes falling for its childlike controls. And then there's the manual roof, which does nothing for your cool image either, because you have to get out of the thing. Press a button, put that up, haul the roof out, flip that bit up, pop that bit back, fold that bit back, and then you've got 2 clips at the front to do, and you have to do it all again to get it back down. But even though this is a tiny, weeny 2-seater sports car, the boot is big enough for more than a baseball cap. Now, when it comes to extras, you're going to have to pay for them. These deliciously heated leather seats and the air conditioning system will cost more than £1,000, making this spec'd-up street car a pretty pricey proposition. But many of you won't care because small cabriolets seem to be the next big thing. There are open-topped offerings from Nissan, Vauxhall and Mitsubishi on the way to join Peugeot's already extremely successful 206cc.
O que é esse amor da água? Deve sentir muito parecido a esse amor. This is it on the water, love.
OK, it is more expensive than we'd hoped, but there aren't many easy ways of attracting attention for under £13,000. It is a lot of fun. It does sit in a low insurance group, 7, and it is so 2003, darling. Oh, and it has got a rear end that is as cute as Kylie's.
After the sun comes rain again.
Welcome back. We're planning a graphic demonstration of the horrors of a high-speed collision. We want to crash this Volvo into this BMW, a closing speed of 120 miles an hour. So how are we going to do that then? Stage 1, buy some cars. I found this BMW 525 and Volvo 960, both taxed and tested, for £1,000 apiece.
Stage 2, crash them. Now, Tiff and I could have got into these cars, driven at each other, and then at the last moment, jumped out.
But Quentin wasn't keen. So enter Dr. James Brighton, an engineering expert who's pretty handy with hydraulics and knows his way round Radio Shack. We've commissioned him and his team to make our cars controllable by remote control. The ultimate big boys' toys. Our red pipe is the Ariel.
So, James, you've been toiling like a troglodyte to get this car to drive remotely. What's involved?
A mass of wires and a couple of bits of string is all I can see, James.
Washing line, Tim.
How have you done it?
Indeed. Well, there's 3 functions that we have to control. Steering, acceleration, and we need to do brakes. We have an actuator for the brakes, just a spring damper unit.
It's a boot strut, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. Yeah, exactly. So we've got a gas strut here. We've used one of those because it provides a uniform force across its whole travel.
And what's the washing line for?
The washing line, right. Well, this rope here is used to control the steering wheel. So we've got it mounted onto this quadrant across here. And as the quadrant moves left and right, so it turns the steering wheel left and right.
And then how does the throttle actually work then?
OK, well, we've got another quadrant similar to this one that does the steering, mounted at 90 degrees to it. And that pulls this red cord, which is attached to the throttle pedal.
You can change gear as well.
We can, yes. We have another actuator onto the gear linkage, so by using the controller we can actually select drive or reverse.
All with a little help from an air compressor in the boot. How are Quentin and I actually going to drive the car?
How are you going to drive it?
How are we
Right,
going to actuate the actuators?
You need a remote control unit.
If I crash model
have here.
cars, I mean, I'm not very good at those round a little track. I suppose I can go in a straight line.
And here we have just a standard remote control transmitter. Throttle on this one, so forwards for increasing throttle, pull it backwards to slow down. Gears are then pushed forward to go into forwards, pull backwards to go into reverse, and then flick this button to release the brakes, give it some throttle, and then you steer left and right on the right-hand stick.
Sounds easy, and admit it, you want one. Oh, we're off.
Creep away.
Oh, right.
This is rather fun.
Reverse. Come on, boy, come on. Come on, back a bit. Whoa, back a bit. Whoa. Stop!
I sent my man to put it in reverse for us, and very neatly come to a stop now. Brakes on. Fantastic.
So, fully practiced, we lined the cars up, and it was ready. Aim. And technical problem. We couldn't fix it until the next day, so join us for the mother of all impacts. Westminster Abbey, home of the coronation, the House of Kings. Here, amongst tributes to England's great and good, is a single homage to someone from the motor industry. This window is dedicated to the memory of Sir Henry Royce, a brilliant engineer and, of course, the other half of Rolls-Royce. Not, therefore, a brand or car to be taken lightly.
And I want you to bear that in mind while we talk about the new one.
I give you the Phantom. Challenging styling, wouldn't you say?
So, this then is what £250,000 buys you. Something that's very, very big, everywhere, and very German.
Because it is, of course, BMW who are in charge these days, and my, have they got their work cut out. Over the last 30 years or so, the Rolls-Royce brand has become so cheapened and tarnished that it's now a mark associated more with Pools winners and villains than the aristocracy. But if this car is immaculately built and magnificent in every detail, the name of Rolls-Royce could be restored. All it has to do is be the best car in the world.
And in here are the people who are trying to make that happen.
The new £65 million factory at Goodwood, Sussex is a heartening blend of tweed-wearing craftsmanship and technology in all the right places.
If this is your car, I apologise unreservedly. Just don't buy one of these Phantoms with black upholstery. You could buy the one that I've done.
BMW have tried enormously hard to make sure that their factory is lovely in every way, and have tried even harder with attention to detail on the car itself. Like an exhaust valve that operates at low speeds to make one's arrival more understated. Not to mention hubs that always keep the double R perfectly upright. Heated side glass and hidden vents provide more agreeable indirect ventilation. The boulevard setting on the interior lamps gently illuminates you to passers-by. And remember, Rolls owners prefer to hold their steering wheel at 8:20, not 1:50. And I will mention the stereo, with 7.1 surround sound, 9 amplifiers and 15 speakers.
Mind you, there is the odd bit of beastliness, you know. Everything's not absolutely perfect. These are horrible, cheap, tacky, nasty cup holders, so no tactile bounty there at all. Ashtray's jolly good, though. Size of a landfill site.
Rolls owners will be relieved to know that the onboard computer is controlled by a much simpler version of BMW's contentious iDrive.
Open these wonderful rear doors using this magnificent handle from a 50s refrigerator, and you will find, first of all, your very own Rolls-Royce umbrella. Here it is, one of these in each door, and they're Teflon coated so they don't rot. Step inside what is the lounge spec, and you find that the seats are slightly curved so you can talk to each other, but you can also have the theatre spec, which has a multimedia, DVD players, etc. Every Rolls Phantom requires 16 hides for the interior, but it's not just any leather. It's the leather from bulls, because apparently the Germans say that ordinary cows are good for only babies und milk. So does it drive like a Rolls-Royce? Well, undoubtedly. In fact, you feel as though you were piloting a silver cloud that's been tweaked to feel modern. The ride is as smooth as unrolled silk, but then no smoother than the new Jaguar XJ. It is cathedral quiet, but again, no quieter than, say, Lexus LS430. What is really nice and a bit of a revelation is the steering. You'd expect it to be really over-assisted and a bit slacky, but no, it's got lots of information, lots of communication comes up through the wheel, and you never wonder whether there's any grip left. Being a Rolls-Royce, of course, one never has a rev counter. That would be the rude mechanicals being exposed to the Rolls-Royce owner. Instead, you have what's known as a power reserve gauge.
And what wicked Phantom owner could resist flooring the throttle to see if the power reserve ever goes down to single figures? It does, but you'll run out of road before it runs out of power. 60 takes just 5.7 seconds for the V12 and 6-speed automatic. But talking of numbers is so terribly vulgar. For this car, the view from the back seems much more important. And hold on, it won't be what you expect.
My initial impression of this car is that it's an incredibly expensive joke on the indiscriminately rich.
I like its silence and its sense of weight, but it's so bloody ugly.
I can't help believing you'd have to have a sort of severe psychological problem actually to want to own and drive one of these cars.
It's not really a car, it's a kind of boast.
You might as well have, I'm a Rich Pratt tattooed on your forehead.
The front looks gorgeous. Is this the SOS button that phones the police if you get carjacked? That's it. It's a bit dangerous, that, to have it there, really. I mean, your high heels could get stuck there, couldn't it? Know what I mean?
It's like Robin Williams' joke about cocaine. It's God's way of telling you you've got too much money.
Slow down, people can't see me. Hello! Wonderful day for buying London. How much are you? Pretentious?
So has Rolls-Royce been saved? Is it back as the best car in the world? Well, undoubtedly BMW have restored some of the reputation for build quality, engineering excellence and attention to detail. But, and it's a big but, whilst they were slaving over the technology, they didn't half take their eye off the styling. Everyone we spoke to on our travels, policemen, passers-by, doormen, design gurus, all said it was unforgivably ugly.
So there you are, you spent your £250,000, you're driving along, and there will always be this doubt, this horrible echoing doubt in your mind that those people who are looking at you so intently, are they looking at you with warm approval, or are they actually pointing and laughing? I couldn't bear the embarrassment, so I will not be signing a cheque for a Rolls-Royce Phantom. And neither, really, should you.
Welcome back. We're creating a typical head-on accident at typical speeds with typical cars, except they're remote controlled. The tension is high. To capture the carnage in as much detail as possible, we've got 3 ruggedized ultra-high-speed film cameras, 3 digital cameras normally used for military research, and a camera the size of a thimble transmitting the onboard view. All in order to show you what you never normally see. Despite our non-scientific approach, our operation has caused quite a stir in crash testing circles, and the Millbrook Research Facility's Andrew Beach has come to observe. There would have been no survivors. Airbags would not have helped. So Andy, what was here that isn't there anymore?
Well, you can see, because the vehicles didn't actually head on, that on this side of the vehicle, which wasn't hit, you can see the wheel, the suspension and the front structure.
But that beam, isn't that beam pretty solid?
It is, but look at this side. The whole of the wheel's been pushed back, the suspension has gone. That beam has been crushed back, just like it was a bit of tin foil. Here, you can see the engine. It's been twisted in the whole vehicle. The prop shaft is broken. And if we move backwards here to what's left of the driver's door, you can see that the front wheel is now practically touching the back of the driver's door.
And there's no better news for the Beamer. Steering wheel's like right in. There's no room between the front seats and the back seats.
That's right, just look at the amount of crush you've got here, the deformation in the A-pillar, how that's been pushed right back. The wheel has been pushed right back into where the driver's feet would be. And if you look to see the engine really hasn't moved that much. It's more or less where it was. So that shows that when the two cars collided, the engine, the front structure and the engine didn't really take a lot of the energy. It's only when the cars impacted in this area that the actual work started to be done, and most of the energy has been absorbed here, and as you can see, that's resulted in a lot of deformation.
So, Andy, I mean, these cars are, what, 10 years old? I mean, are modern designs any better at surviving these sort of accidents?
Yes, modern cars are designed to undergo what's called an offset test, where we actually deliberately only impact half of the vehicle width. So the sort of damage that you see here would be less on a modern car. But I have to say, this 60 mile an hour test, compared to we test at 40 or legally 35 miles an hour, is still way above what a modern car would be able to survive.
So what can we do? Is there any great ideas for the future?
Well, you're fighting sort of conflicting requirements here. You've got the requirement of keeping the passenger compartment rigid so that the occupants don't get crushed, but then you also want to make the front of the car nice and soft so it absorbs as much of the energy as possible. I guess the one thing we could do is make cars with 30-foot bonnets, but they really wouldn't be practical to drive around on the roads.
But I mean, I've seen lots of cars after racing accidents, but nothing quite prepares you for something like this. It makes you think, I'll tell you that.
So next time you're on a country road, a contraflow or about to overtake, just remember this.
Next week on Fifth Gear, the Geneva Show. It's a vintage year. Tom and I went to enjoy the glamour.
This week, we're at the Geneva Motor Show. Plus, pitting drunk drivers against tired drivers.
For 51 weeks a year, the coolest thing about Geneva is the fact there are no speed limits. Well, on the lake, anyway.
But for 1 week of the year, the coolest thing about Geneva is the motor show. Are you ordering one?
No, I can't afford one of those. And we'll start with the most important car of the show, the Tata Indigo. Right, that'll do.
No, we'll start with the 360 Challenge Stradale, Ferrari's idea of going modded. So they've lowered it, fitted Tarsi wheels, lashed on new sills, lost about 110 kilograms by using things like lightweight windows and titanium wheel bolts, fitted carbon ceramic brake discs and boosted power to 425 bhp. Inside there are some pretty neat features. This carbon fibre seat has been covered with special grippy cloth. The gear shift on the right has been lengthened to make gear changes easier when you're blasting out of tight corners. But the best bit, sport mode is standard. To liven things up, just hit race. Now, if you've always felt your Murcielago was a bit too big, then get a Gallardo, the new baby Lamborghini.
A lovely little four-wheel drive number with a 5-litre V10. It's going to cost £97,500, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's going to sell like hotcakes. It's a rival for the Ferrari 360. So which one would you choose? The doors open normally, boring, but seeing as it's got 500 horsepower, I'll let it off. 62 comes up in 4.2 seconds, and top speed is 192. Right, back down to earth, and the Vauxhall stand.
Meet the Signum, a frightfully upmarket Vectra. Not a figure of fun, though. We quite liked it.
Treat it as a dead posh hatchback limousine with a distinctly premium feel and clever rear seats that slide, as this man who works for Vauxhall is demonstrating. Prices should start at a well satisfying 18 grand. Over at BMW, they're shouting about the X-Activity, a climbing frame on wheels. The interior is made of cow and neoprene, while the smart seats have no adjustments. They just mould to the shape of your body. Can you guess where the sat-nav is? There it is! And wait till you see the boot. It automatically loads bicycles, as long as they don't have front wheels.
What do you reckon they'll call it?
Well, the X5 was 5 Series sized, and hence the X5 tag.
That's probably what, I don't know, 2 sizes smaller?
What, about 3?
Yeah, probably. So what do you reckon they'll call it?
No idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not content with making the fastest car on sale today, Pagani now make the fastest open-top too. The Zonda Roadster has the same 7.3-litre V12 as the coupe, which means well over 200 mile an hour. The cost, around £380,000, a 50 grand premium over the standard car.
This isn't just a tin opener job though. The carbon work is beautiful, but only 40 will be made. However, each one handcrafted to the owner's special needs.
So what I really want is an extra wide version with like a fridge in it for sweets, if that's all right.
Fine room, yes, of course, but how big are the suites?
Massive! Unlike the new Citroën C2, shown here in grown-up rally clothes, this little cutesy will replace the Saxo in the autumn. Skoda launched their own Mighty Atom rally car in the shape of the Fabia. Take it seriously, because we're talking four-wheel drive and 300 horsepower here, people.
And Ford are getting in on the act too with their concept Fiesta, full of superb design details, from the 18-inch magnesium wheels to the 6-speed sequential gear change that is, frankly, a work of art.
Honda showed off the two faces of their new upmarket Accord. The first safe and sensible. So that's what it looks like when the airbags go off. The second, mean and moody. What a body kit!
Posers everywhere will be thrilled to see that the Renault Megane now comes in a rather clever convertible version. Oh, look at that. As does the Beetle, which goes on sale in May and starts at just over 15 grand. But if it's style you're after, buy an Alfa GT. And no, boys, she doesn't come with a car.
But this will be the fifth gear party car, the A-Level Volga. Built to order in Russia, it's based on a BMW 8 Series, has a 5-litre V12 and what the spokesman calls spy style.
Join us later for more mouth-watering morsels from Ford, Aston Martin, Bugatti, and find out what our 200-mile-an-hour car of the show is.
For 25 years, we've been told that drink driving is a mug's game. 1 in every 6 deaths on our roads is related to a driver being over the limit, which makes that one for the road a sobering thought.
But there could be an even bigger danger. Driving when you're tired. We've all done it, but we're taking a massive risk. Fifth Gear, however, has a plan.
Now, there's reams of research on driving while you're drunk, but actually very little on driving when you're exhausted. So the plan is to compare the effects of fatigue versus alcohol.
Could driving whilst tired be just as dangerous as driving under the influence?
To help us find out, we've got some guinea pigs. There's Adam Robertson, a 25-year-old Ford Focus driver, Lisa Clark, business advisor at a bank, and her husband Graham, an engineer. Emma Craddock is 25 and works in PR. Steve James loves his Astra Coupe Turbo, and Andy Radley is very big in Amdram. Plus, we'll be putting ourselves to the test as well.
Cheers, team.
Join us in a moment to see Tiff and his team getting drunk and Quentin's lot staying up all night. Then we'll put each of them in a car and put their driving to the test.
We're back investigating whether tired driving is as bad as drink driving. We're not scientific, but we are very curious. It's 2 a.m. at this hotel in Bedford. Quentin and his team have had a couple of hours sleep, and now it's time for our Karen to wake them up.
2 minutes, just 2 minutes.
Good morning. Good morning.
With 12 hours to go before the driving test, no snoozing was allowed. Of course, it's not just our Karen who could disturb your sleep. Anyone with a new baby knows you don't get a proper night's kip for months. Working night shifts or returning from a long-haul flight is equally disruptive. Drink driving may be socially unacceptable, but driving whilst tired is sometimes unavoidable.
Fast forward to lunchtime and I'm in the chair with one of the easier fifth gear assignments, getting my team drunk.
Everybody's alcohol tolerance is different and any amount of booze can affect your driving, but in general the legal limit equates to a couple of pints for chaps or 3 small glasses of wine for the ladies.
We checked we were over the limit with these test yourself kits, and isn't it amazing how hilarious tiny things are when you've had a few? Dark green and you're over the limit.
So, crunch time, the driving, on a specially designed route of twists and turns at Millbrook. With the cameraman in a sky crane watching every move, the idea is to stay between the lines, avoid the awkwardly parked car, and parallel park at the end.
This sober and well-rested driver proved the course could be completed with no infringements and took 1 minute 28 seconds. How would the rest of us compare? First up, the tired guinea pigs.
So how do you feel?
I feel perfectly fine.
Wobbly legs a little bit, but feeling pretty good. I feel like I need to go to the blood bank to get my eyes drained.
I feel absolutely shattered.
Lisa may have looked pale and dark-eyed, but she drove pretty well. She crossed a couple of lines and was 13 seconds slower than the benchmark time, but only because she made a meal of parking. Her hubby Graham was fine too, although that's maybe because when it came to the parked car, he cut the corner. Cheeky, but hardly dangerous. Then it was Adam's turn, whose tiredness did seem to affect his driving. It wasn't long before a little telltale sign sneaked in.
Get out of my way.
That little outburst is completely predictable. When you're tired and ratty, road rage is much more likely. And when it came to the parking manoeuvre, well, bang goes his no-claims bonus.
Temper, temper, Adam. Time for the drunken guinea pigs.
No, I'm feeling absolutely fine. So 3 pints, I don't know, one more than maybe, or maybe 2 more, but I'm ready to drive.
No, I feel fine as well. I've run out 3 or 4 and I'm perfectly all right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Would you drive, though? Would you drive?
No, I wouldn't.
What you've had now?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't drive.
I can drive, but I wouldn't drive on the public roads.
No, but you don't actually feel that bad.
No, not at all.
Well, we'll see. Andy went first and was very steady, but found it hard to stay between the lines, and he felt the need to talk all the time.
Yeah, dizzy.
Oh, Jesus.
This would feel a lot better if I was sober, I'll never know that.
The parking manoeuvre went very well.
Thank you.
Till the end.
Forgot to put the handbrake on.
Next up was Emma, who was really trying to concentrate hard, but she dawdled round in 1 minute and 53 seconds, didn't make complete stops, and was well over the line at the parked car. Then it was Steve's go. Once he realised the engine wasn't running, that is.
I've selected first gear, look at this, and
It's come out.
we get no drive.
The engine's not on.
Oh, that would be why then, wouldn't it?
It seems safe to say the alcohol had magnified his natural exuberance. The stop signs tended to get overlooked, the parked car was given a particularly wide berth, and he didn't hold back on the revs. And remember, a few moments ago he told us he felt fine. But it's not surprising. Booze makes you feel invincible.
Now, we know it's unscientific, but our results do tie in with other research. The tired drivers only made minor errors, and experts agree that constant stop-start driving like this helps stave off dozing, whereas the drunk driver's judgment had obviously been affected, and they made potentially much more dangerous mistakes.
Interesting results. But next up, it's Tiff's and Quentin's turn on the most dramatic test of all. Join us in a moment when we put one presenter who's shattered and one who's drunk through a motorway drive at night.
Welcome back to the Geneva Motor Show, packed to the rafters with glamour. Oh, she's nice. Anyway, back to the cars. Now, Subaru have stopped sticking on spoilers and started styling. Unfortunately, the B11S looks like a pig in a sock. It points the way forward for the Impreza, and this concept has a twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine and a 5-speed auto. Nearly 400 brake horsepower is promised. But look at that face.
This is the American dream, dreamt by Italian dreamers. It's Ital Design's take on a Chevrolet. Celebrating 50 years of the Corvette, the Moray has domes that can be removed, so you can revel in the roar of the 6-litre V8. Ah, the Opel GTC. You're sitting there thinking, I'd like one of those. Well, Vauxhall have hinted that this is the new Astra.
You'll have noticed that all the other manufacturers have concept cars that are sleek and stylish and sexy. Well, this is Hyundai's. It's called the OLV.
It was designed by a man called Dragan, and he says it's thought-provoking. The interior is resistant to water, scratches and dents, and is, green. Thank God for Sparrow. An engine in the wheel makes this amazing Tron-style bike my favourite concept. It's got no sides, which means I can fit in. Almost.
Time for a quick dose of supercars, starting with Ford's GT. Only about 1,000 a year will be built. They'll have 500 horsepower, more than a Ferrari 360, and they'll weigh 1,200 kilograms, about the same as a Mini. Koenigsegg are Sweden's supercar manufacturer, and this, the CC, is apparently capable of 242 miles an hour. We love the wraparound windscreen and the groovy doors.
Bugatti, meanwhile, keep teasing us with the Veyron, which should be out by the end of the year. It has a 16-cylinder engine, which means 252 miles an hour. But some people are predicting that loads of weight and four-wheel drive will mean that it'll handle hopelessly.
But the only thing you need to know about this car is 1,001 horsepower.
OK, we're close to our car of the show, which we almost found here.
Right, the way I see it, all you've got to do between now and 2005, when this car is launched, is save roughly £92 a day, and then someone like you might be able to afford one.
It is the Aston Martin AM V8 Vantage, and it should get you out of your 911s in droves. 60 grand for a piece of Aston ass? I wouldn't say no. Not only do you get a superbly proportioned car, but an interior that's a pleasure to behold. Everything is bespoke, and you can specify any material and any colour you fancy. Under there is a 4.3-litre V8, which should sound scrummy. Weight distribution is 50-50, which is about right. It looks pretty svelte, and I just hope it goes as well as it looks.
And so to our absolute favourite, the Porsche Carrera GT.
Developed by double World Rally champion Walter Röhrl, it may just make you put the Enzo up for sale. A 10-cylinder, 5.7-litre engine, 612 horsepower, 205 miles an hour, 0 to 62 in 3.9 seconds, plus exquisite fit and finish, handling that will undoubtedly be divine, and, are you listening, Needles, a proper 6-speed manual gearbox.
A 6-speed manual?
Yes, a 6-speed manual! The monocoque and subframe are made entirely from carbon fibre reinforced plastic, and the wheels are made of magnesium. The price, £300,000, and deliveries start later in the year. But not, unfortunately, to our house.
We revealed earlier that around a twisty route, driving while tired didn't seem as bad as driving while drunk. But now there's a harder test, a motorway at night. How will the monotony of mile after mile affect a snoozy me and a boozy Tiff?
We'll each spend 30 minutes lapping the closed bowl at Millbrook with an observer watching our every move. The challenge? To stay within one lane and maintain a speed of between 60 and 70 miles an hour.
I would go first, and having peaked and troughed all day, was definitely at a low ebb. With the observer aboard, it's that man again, we were on our way.
Quite surprised how knackered actually I am. I'm so tired, I'm having to wear my glasses, which I never ever do, and already I can feel it. I mean, I just don't know where I'm going, and I'm just following the white lines, wanting this to be over as quickly as possible.
So-called highway hypnosis is most likely to occur between 2 and 6 a.m. when your biorhythms are at a natural low. The accidents are potentially much worse because the driver asleep at the wheel simply won't brake before a crash, so the impacts are much faster. So what should you do?
Try and take 1 or 2 cups of coffee, caffeinated coffee or caffeinated drink, caffeine takes about 20 minutes to have an effect. So you have an opportunity there for doing something else, and that something else should be take a quick nap. Just settle back in your car seat, lock the car, make sure you're safe, and just shut your eyes for 10 to 15 minutes. Even though you're not necessarily sleeping, just shutting, resting your eyes, having a quick zizz, that is effective. It's far better to do that whilst the coffee's kicking in than going for fresh air or exercise or take a break in other ways.
During my 30 minutes, I drifted across the white lines 3 times, and my speed wavered significantly 9 times, and I hadn't a clue. Then it was Tiff's turn. We'd kept him topped up all day and checked he was just over the legal limit.
It's -3. -3. Attention, it is essential that you read the instructions. Highway code takes precedence.
And with those thoughts ringing in his ears, we sent him away.
Now, of course, I know I'm over the limit, and yet somehow I feel very able to drive. It's quite frightening. I feel fine. I can just ease the speed up and go for a nice long cruise.
Which is exactly what he did, and seemed to keep an active mind the whole time.
Where's the clock in this car? His headlights are rubbish. I remember when I was breaking the speed record for comic relief at 200 miles an hour in a McLaren. It took about 39 seconds. Now it's taking 2 minutes. Temperature's gone up from -3 to -2, so it's getting warmer.
Tiff drove perfectly. In terms of steering a steady course and speed, it was an error-free performance.
But even though I'm over the limit, I know my reactions probably aren't very good. But just cruising, concentrate. I can do it.
But I still wouldn't have dared drive on the public road. I was fine on my own, but I couldn't be sure how well I'd be able to react if there was other traffic around me.
Driving steep is probably worse than driving over the limit. In fact, we think from the research we've done here that more people are killed on our roads in this country through falling asleep at the wheel than being over the limit with alcohol. We all drive sleepy, and we've all had experience of doing that. People just don't realise that it is far more dangerous to drive while sleepy than actually slightly over the limit.
So, it's the morning after. He smells like a brewery and has a jackhammer hangover.
He's been yawning his head off all the time. But what have we learned?
Well, it's important to say that we haven't exactly done this with the rigours of science.
But there's no doubt that driving whilst drunk on the city course led to some dangerous over-exuberance.
But I know that if I'd had to go around that bowl for another 10 minutes, I would have started to snore, crashed, and died. So the next time someone says to me, I can't drive because I'm exhausted, I won't be calling them a fairy, because I'll know exactly how dangerous it really is.
Tonight, we'll be smoking around in a brand new Jag, spending 100 grand on accessories for an Aston, and playing with explosives in a fiery chase-bang wallop of a finale, because...
This week on Fifth Gear, we're going to be answering a question that's been bothering us for years.
If you crash a car, what are the chances of it exploding like it does in the movies?
We've all seen it happen. After the smallest of shunts, your average car turns itself into an apocalyptic fireball.
So join us later in the programme when we'll be discovering just how much punishment a car can take before it bursts into flames.
And we'll be finding out exactly how they make those movie fireballs.
A new Jaguar is always a big deal for us Brits. In your 20s, you want a hot hatch. In your 30s, you want a fast Beamer. In your 40s, well, you kind of want anything with a short skirt and a pulse. But in your 50s, you always end up wanting a Jag. And we're here to tell you whether this has still got claws.
What's new, pussycat? Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's new, pussycat? Whoa, 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 whoa.
Well, actually, they've scrapped the idea of making it out of steel and have decided to make it out of aluminium instead. But what does that mean? Well, whereas the old XJ was made out of steel and welded, which is heavy, the new XJ is made out of aluminium and riveted, which isn't. And that means you don't need as much energy to cart the whole lot around. Simple. Now, typically, that means the whole XJ range is some 200 kilograms lighter than either the Mercedes S-Class or BMW 7 Series, which is like carrying two of me around at all times. Ugh.
There'll be 4 engines, ranging from a 3-litre V6 right up to a supercharged 4.2-litre V8 that goes into this bad boy XJR. It's got 400 brake horsepower and on a straight bit of road will hit 62 in 5 dead. Oh, and give it enough space and it'll run on to electronically limited 155 miles an hour. Phew!
This XJR has air springs and computer-adjusted suspension. It makes the car feel very small and very nimble because it can pump up one side or the other, depending on which way round you're going round a corner.
And it shows in the way the Jag sweeps round the bendy bits. There's plenty of feel through the wheel and big agility for this size of car, with the 6-speed auto coping with anything you can throw at it. And as far as the looks go, it's hard to tell new from old XJ, but that's because Jag didn't want to scare their market. Certainly current owners that I've spoken to love the new car, but personally, I just don't think it's radical enough.
And in here, there's nothing that's going to scare the traditional Jag buyer. You've got a great big slab of solid-looking dash, some really nice clear dials, and a really intuitive and simple-to-use touchscreen sat-nav, much better than BMW 7 Series. And you'll also notice over the old XJ that it's absolutely huge in here, especially in the back. Check this out. This is me in the back with a 6-foot driver. It's an absolutely huge car.
But if you're going to buy an XJ, is the 400 brake horsepower XJR really the one to have? The whole range is more suited to cruising than abusing. It's a more genteel experience. And as I drive through the night, there's plenty of time to reflect. Think about it like this. The 3-litre XJ6 has a perfectly adequate 240 brake horsepower and the same appealing image. And it costs just £39,000. That should make all those German luxury car manufacturers quake in their boots.
Now, what we want to know is what are the chances of cars exploding like they do in the movies?
Well, to put it into perspective, you need look no further than this chilling video.
It was shot by the Institute of Traffic Accident Investigators. They started up a Renault 25 and drove it using remote control into a Ford Orion at 62 miles an hour. Just the sort of accident that happens all too often in reality when a car on a main road hits a queue of traffic at a junction. The Orion is practically vaporised in the collision, but does it catch fire? No, not a hint of a spark, no tickle of a flame. To confirm that this wasn't a one-off, we spoke to a fire investigation expert. For a start, why didn't the petrol tank explode?
The petrol tank will only go up once nearly all the petrol's out and there's just vapour left. And then you've got to have air and you've got to have a flame. And there's a very rare circumstances to get all those together. It can happen, but probably only one time in 1,000. Most car fires start from a smouldering electrical fault. and the cables slowly give off some fumes and eventually fire, it won't go bang. People put in stereos, you've got bad connections, and you get chafing of wires and things like that, and shorts, and then you get overheating, and then that melts the wires and it'll set fire to anything in the proximity.
So apart from electrical, what else causes car fires?
Well, nearly a quarter are caused by fuel leaks. But petrol won't go up on its own. Petrol won't go up even if it drips onto a manifold. What you have to do with petrol is you have to have some electrical form of ignition or a naked flame, of course.
Now, Tiff reckons if you see smoke coming out of the bonnet, pull up, open the bonnet and tackle the inferno yourself. What do you reckon?
Well, Tiff's Superman. You know, we have to remember that. But I mean, in reality, you know, most people aren't supermen. So if your car catches fire, pull up, get out and leave it alone.
The first thing you'll notice is smoke coming out of the dashboard or flames licking up around the edge of the bonnet. But there's almost always time to stop the car, get out and call the fire brigade.
As the flames catch hold, the interior plastic and the seats are incinerated first. Then, as the car heats up, the windows explode outwards. So stand well back. I have to admit that in its way, an inferno like this makes a fascinating sight.
But it's not the sort of entertainment to cause a queue at the box office. So how do they make those movie fireballs? Well, they need some high-octane expertise. Join us after the break when we'll be meeting the people who do this.
We're finding out how they make cars explode in the movies. And in the pursuit of a proper answer, we thought we ought to set the scene for you. You know, the sort of thing, the bad guy makes a run for it. The hero checks his hair and sets off in pursuit. He does a couple of fancy stunts. Quickly catches up with the bad guy. Get out of it. Give him a couple of taps up the backside. Get alongside him and... Oh, I've always wanted to do that. But I enjoyed it so much, I'm going to do it again! And I think you know what happens next. Adrian slams into a conveniently parked truck and explodes in a deathly ball of flames.
But before I meet my grisly end, we need the help of pyrotechnics expert Chris Lawson. Chris and his team have been blowing up cars for years.
And in a minute, they'll be rigging mine. Now, there's quite an art to these explosions because one big movie explosion is actually a mass of little ones all hardwired from a control box like this. There are charges applied to the windows to make them go bang. More get stuck on the doors to make them fly open. And a tray of explosives under the bonnet gives it an extra push at the moment of impact. Plus, you need a few gallons of petrol wrapped in explosives for the main bang. More of that later.
But blowing up Adrian's car is only half of the story. Obviously, he can't drive it into the lorry himself. So, what do we use? A nitrogen-powered cannon, of course. Cue another team of experts, Bickers Action. They've cannon crashed cars on everything from Bond films to music videos. Out go all those lovely leather seats to make way for an 8-foot steel cylinder, which is bolted to a pre-assembled steel rig and then welded into the car. A close-fitting piston is then carefully inserted into the cylinder, which, when pressurised by compressed nitrogen, will launch the car with neck-snapping G-force to 40 miles an hour in just 7 feet for its final journey into the back of the truck. With Adrian's grand finale just moments away, the piston of the nitrogen cannon is firmly attached to this 9-ton lorry, with this little restraining cable designed to snap when the pressure inside reaches 1,000 psi, so creating instant acceleration. The cylinder is connected to this massive nitrogen tank, and when the moment comes, it's 3, 2, 1. Bye-bye, Adrian.
But not, of course, before the pyrotechnics team have filled the car with their explosives, several gallons of petrol and some detonator cord that burns at an amazing 12 miles per second. And it's all connected by a maze of wires back to their control box hidden behind the truck. Join us for the stunt later, after we've heard from Vicky.
Nah. The best bit of Hey Jude. I wonder where Paul McCartney wrote that song. Actually, it was right here. In his beautiful 1966 Goodwood Green Aston Martin DB6. Complete with specially requested tape recorder for noting down those vital flashes of inspiration. McCartney owned this, as well as a Mini Cooper, like all the other Beatles, when he was just 23. Back then, the Mini would have cost £778. This would have been £5 grand. But it wasn't an extravagant rock star whim. Macca loved the car and kept it for 6 years. He even had it flown to France for a driving holiday. Sitting here, it's really easy to see how he got so attached. I mean, driving down this long and winding road in a hurry to get back after a hard day's night. The luxury, the 4-litre straight six, the character are all perfect. And I mean perfect. Utterly, completely, totally perfect, down to the last nut and bolt. Why? Because it's been painstakingly restored over 16 months by Aston Martin themselves to showcase the talents of their works service department. Now, works service isn't just a restoration business, nor is it just the garage where Prince Charles gets his DB7 MOT'd. It's where anything can happen to an Aston Martin. It's a very special place indeed. Imagine that you were an Aston Martin owner and you retired abroad. Well, Works Service will happily change your car from right-hand drive to left-hand drive. Then say, for example, you've got gout. Well, they will change your manual gearbox into an automatic one. Then, when you pass your car on to your children, they will upgrade the handling and the power. Nice. It doesn't stop there. They'll rebuild your car to a higher standard than when it was new, and then recreate the day you first took delivery by presenting it with contemporary magazines. Always wanted a DB4 with aircon? We've hidden it in the door, Mr. Bond. Why not fit remote central locking as well, and a digital radio? Fed up with the square lamps on your DB7? Then get round ones. And while you're at it, why not swap your American walnut for European? What's the maddest request you've had to modify a car?
The most significant one that we always remember was the making of a James Bond DB5 for
a proper real-life one?
Oh, yes, a real DB5.
What things did it have on it?
It had everything. We did it right. The indicator lights came down, the guns came out, and there was a strobe light and a speaker noise. And inside the car, it had the satellite navigation system. And then under the driver's seat was the full tray that came out with the dagger, with the compass in it, the gun, the bullets, the hand grenade and everything. But the key thing for us, and the most fun that we had, apart from the revolving number plates and all the normal things and the red button on top of the gear lever, was the squirting the water out from under the rear lights. We actually took a step back from doing it with oil. We did it with water, which was a lot of fun, and of course the smoke. And road testing that with the smoke out the back, it was pretty good.
So that's what we all want for Christmas then. Of course, none of this comes cheap. Owners think nothing of spending £50,000 buying a car and then a further £150,000 getting it right. Seems mad, but when you adore your car, it doesn't seem to matter. All you need is love.
Time for a quick blast at a new concept from Peugeot, the Hoggar. At last, the vastly underserved hippie and beach bum community gets a dune buggy for the 21st century. Apart from showcasing some pretty aggressive roller skate styling, the Hoggar's main feature is that it has not one engine, but count them, two. And they are, dun dun dun, diesel. One powers the front wheels and one powers the rears to give it four-wheel drive. They're turbocharged 2.2-litre four-cylinder jobs, and each pumps out 180 horsepower, which is respectable. But run them together and you've got a whole 360 brake horsepower to carve up local seaside resorts, and 800 newton meters of torque. Take that, Blackpool. The body is a one-piece carbon fibre honeycomb, and nice details include a sequential gear change and roll bars that double as air intakes. The Speedo works off GPS satellites, and an onboard camera combines with an inclinometer to help you park with hitherto unheard-of precision. And there's no stereo. Just load in all your fave tunes electronically and listen to them back on the MP3 player. And for the pub quizzes among you wondering what or who a Hoggar is, well, it's a mountainous plateau in the Sahara. So there.
The grand finale is getting ever closer. We're about to recreate an explosion like the ones you see in the movies. So, to get you in the mood, let's cut to the chase. So, what are the chances of a car exploding like it does in the movies?
Well, pretty high. If you fill it full of petrol, explosives, and then fire it into the back of a lorry.
Next week, it's a Fifth Gear special. Men versus women. A motoring battle of the sexes when we find out whether there's any truth in those notorious old cliches, like women can't park. And what about men think they're better drivers than they actually are?
I love the way you brace yourself.
Off the brakes.
And is it true that women have absolutely no sense of direction whatsoever? So that's our Fifth Gear special, men versus women.
Ask any bloke what their driving's like, and they're likely to tell you they're either good or very good. Ask their opinion of the opposite sex, though, and you're likely to get a very different answer.
Women can't read a map upside down. If you're travelling downwards on a map, they always tell you to turn left when you should, of course, turn right.
Too careful on the road and never make a quick decision.
Probably sounds rather male chauvinist to you, but one has to face the facts after all.
Women, you won't be surprised to learn, disagree. Men think that they can park, they can read a map, and basically they were born to drive.
I think men are all just too big-headed. They just think they know how to drive and women don't. I think men do drive aggressively. Bring that guy to me, I'll show you how to read a map.
Let's face it, men and women have been arguing about driving for years. But is there any evidence to back up those tired old cliches like women can't park or men are too arrogant behind the wheel?
Well, Fifth Gear has decided to find out. We've chosen 3 opinionated couples to act as guinea pigs in a series of tests. Meet Simon and Annie. Neither makes a good passenger.
There's the impatience coming out.
What?
Pursing the lips, tapping the steering wheel, revving the accelerator.
What, so you're telling me you enjoy sitting at the traffic lights?
Well, it's a fact of life, isn't it? Oh, darling, will you stop it?
That is there? I haven't done anything to you.
No chance of a nice, relaxing drive with Kelly and Dave.
Brilliant. Approaching a roundabout, no indication. Anybody behind you? Yes.
No, actually, no, there isn't anybody behind me. I've already checked
There's one van waiting to pull out of the White Sierra behind you.
No, there is nothing behind me.
Push! Airbag.
I'm not.
Boof, boof.
Anymore, you slagging me off all the bleeding time.
And here's students Charlotte and Nick, who act like an old married couple once they're in the car.
Watch out.
Nick, I know. I'm sorry, yeah, but I know when to stop. Can you put your windscreen wipers on, please?
Do you know what? The more you tell me to do something, the more I don't want to do it.
And finally, we're going to need someone to make sense of our test results. Professor Frank McKenna is the UK's leading authority in this area, and he'll be giving us the lowdown on how men and women differ.
Let's face it, we all know that women can't park. They have a problem with just reversing for starters, then getting all those angles right totally baffles them. Men just seem to be able to do it better. So, a simple test should prove the point.
Come on, admit it. Nobody particularly likes having to parallel park, especially if they've got an audience. Nevertheless, our volunteers have got to squeeze into the designated space as fast as they can. And to add some real-life pressure, these 2 yellow jobbies will compress the space after 10 seconds. Take too long to park, and you could feel the pinch.
When you think about reversing, it does make demands on your spatial ability, your awareness of where your body is in relation to 3-dimensional space. And when we look at tasks in the laboratory where you're rotating objects in space mentally, then men reliably perform better on that type of task.
First up, it's Simon, and no problem at all.
Like stones, all that we fall for.
Next, it's Simon's wife, Annie, who's more tentative, takes ages, goes in far too steep, and guess what? Typical.
Dave sets off confidently enough. Mind you, he's got a point to prove back at home.
You can't park very well. You were abandoned more than park. Need a taxi ride from the car to the curb sometimes.
Thanks.
Well, the technique can hardly be called pretty.
Hey!
But he does get in. just.
For all her talk, Kelly can't even find reverse. But once going, she turns out to be the quickest, smoothest, neatest parker so far. If anyone should be good at this, it's Nick. He's always having to park.
You'll spend about 10 minutes looking for a space that's big enough for the car. Then when you get there and the traffic's all built up behind you, you make me get out, walk round the front of the car, you slide across subtly, no one sees you, and I have to park the bloody car.
Now, who was it that said practice makes perfect?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Blimey, what must Charlotte's driving be like if she normally prefers Nick to park?
I reckon that has to go down as a draw. OK, the women's spatial awareness wasn't great, but nor was the men's. Our second cliché being tested is, men think they're better drivers than they actually are. So, can they really control a vehicle better than women? At the last minute, our drivers will be asked to either make an emergency stop, or take evasive action to their right, or to their left.
They all have to approach at a steady 45 miles an hour, and with the ABS disconnected, it's not as easy as you might think. Right, emergency avoidance, that horrible thing we hope we'll never have to do, but it could be tonight, tomorrow, a week's time, a year's time. But one day you're going to have to suddenly react to an accident or something happening in front of you, and that's what this test simulates. You won't know which way you're going to have to swerve or stop until the last minute.
Now, girls, I reckon you're going to be good at this because we are very observant.
You're not. You're half asleep most of the time
We're
when
not.
you're driving along.
We're so not. So I reckon that we'll be super, super good. Charlotte, are you looking forward to this?
No, I'm absolutely terrified.
Why?
Because I've never done anything like this before and I don't know what's going to happen. And I'll probably drive straight through the middle of it.
Well, I hope you won't.
Yeah.
I love the way you brace yourself.
Too blimmin' right, I do. Off the brakes. You should have come off the brakes really quickly and started pumping the brakes, then you got some steering and you'd have got it back round again. But, you know...
It was crap.
Bring me my next victim, quite frankly. My next victim is Simon, who, according to his wife, really needs good reactions.
That's one thing I really, really hate, that really annoys me about your driving. When we're doing about 90 odd down the motorway, as everybody does, you'll actually go so close to the car in front of you and then you'll just go like that and clip the back end off it almost. And it scares the life out of me. It really does scare the life out of me.
I think that's something from guys, that's something that every sort of petrol head suffers from. Anybody who sort of watched a Formula One race or even sort of rallying, probably at the back of her mind somewhere thinks he could do it just as good.
More speed, you're in Off the brakes, dear. Okay. That was better.
But still,
but
it up.
Next, it's the girls' turn, and Kelly seems no more in control than the lads. But Annie showed what concentration and a cool head can do. That was on the speed. And then Charlotte came along and really rubbed our noses in it.
I am
give up.
great. Do I do it again?
The women actually outperformed the males. And when we look at beyond this type of task, we see that there are real differences in driver confidence between men and women. Men tend to express a great deal of overconfidence in their driving skills. When we actually explore whether that driver confidence is well placed, does it actually match their ability, we find that in general, the confidence that people express in their ability is simply not matched by their actual driving ability.
No, down there!
Join us after the break to find out if women have any sense of direction whatsoever.
To map reading.
And we'll have a boys versus girls race to see if men really are the arrogant, aggressive, competitive drivers that women think they are. Welcome back to Men versus Women, our not hugely scientific look at the battle of the sexes behind the wheel. We've already seen that the girls are no worse than the guys at parking. But when it comes to avoiding trouble,
Brakes.
it's best to let us ladies drive.
So, on to the next cliche then. Women can't navigate. Actual control of a car is all well and good, but there's so much more to driving than that. Now, for all the women watching, this is a map. It's used to help guide oneself from one destination to another. I thought I ought to point it out, because for most women, when you hand them one of these, they start turning it around in the vague hope that it will lead them in the direction they want to go, which of course it won't.
For this challenge, each team will start from the same location and be staggered by about 10 minutes. They will have a standard road map and will be asked to go from one destination to another. We will be observing who goes the furthest and who takes the longest. Boys in the blue car, girlies in the grey. Each vehicle has been fitted with a tracking device which will allow Tiff and I to keep a check on their progress.
First instruction in the envelope, no time to waste, get started, get moving, open it on the move. See you in victory lane, boys. The first challenge is to find a car park on the other side of town.
The NC pre-car park on Bromsgrove Street. Beautiful, yeah.
Right then, girls. This is where I need you to get to. Open it when you're on the move, and you don't need any luck, because it's in the bag. Sweet.
Bit of a slow start for the girls, whereas the guys have already made it to the first checkpoint. Well done, boys, well done, very smooth, 9 minutes straight here. Where's your next instruction? And the rules say a new navigator for every leg of the journey.
Where are we heading to?
Barton in the Beans, Leicestershire, without using a motorway.
Barton in the Beans is a small village some 25 miles northeast of the boys' current location. Hey, well done. Right, the boys did it in slightly quicker time, which is rather annoying. These are your next instructions. There you go.
But before you open them, all change seats. Round we go, up we go. Yes, move them around.
Hey!
What did it say? What did it say? Barton in the Beans, Leicestershire, without using a motorway. What? Do I turn right or I don't know.
In a minute, we'll be heading down the A4097, which will take us out towards Curdworth. It's plain sailing from there.
Don't go right. Don't go right.
Is Leicester and Leicestershire?
Yeah, but go. Sorry, what?
I think we'll be turning right here. This should be the B4098.
We're not doing the quickest. We're doing the easiest.
No, Rich, you see, the boys, being map readers, just saw A to B. They have worked their path along little country routes. They are going straight for the docks.
Yeah.
The girls apparently took the main road to Coventry. Was that shopping perhaps first?
I'm so annoyed with myself. I really am.
It's quite staggering, the fact that our destination is up there
Yes.
by the red dot,
Yes,
and they've gone so
it is.
far out. I have no excuse, quite frankly.
No, down there. No, here. 4113.
It's not looking too good for the girls.
Up there. Yeah.
But after only 1 hour, the boys have arrived.
Barton in the Beans. There you go.
Hello, boys. It's Tiff, yes. Well done. How is Barton in the Beans? Is it nice there?
Yeah, it's very quiet. There's people twitching the curtains because there's a car driving through it.
Well, very well done. Now we just want you to quickly change seats, all move around again, and just head due west to Whittington near Lichfield. And we'll see you there. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
God, it really just seems like we're in the middle of nowhere.
A38, well, A38, we got Lichfield. A38, Lichfield is just there.
God, the Barton's not even signposted anymore.
Still bet the women understand anyway. They'll still be putting the makeup on now.
Ah. Oh!
Half an hour after the boys, the girls eventually make it to Barton.
Hello.
Charlotte, it's Vicky. Right, we can tell that you've got to Barton, so well done, excellent stuff. I just have to ask, what were you doing in Coventry?
What were we doing near Coventry?
Well, you can tell me when I see you. Anyway, right, your next port of call, you have to get to a place called Whittington.
So we just need to get to Whittington in Lichfield.
The boys are now so far ahead, they can attend to other things.
Yeah. Hello.
God, there's bloody loads of Whittingtons. Yeah, where's Lichfield?
Pick up a B road, the B4593, and that's as good as damn it.
Is it Derbyshire or Gloucester or Lancashire? Hang on, this isn't F5. Or Norfolk or Shropshire. Why doesn't it say Whittington then? Oh, the map reading.
After 1 hour and 50 minutes, the boys arrive at the finish.
Come on. It's an empty car park. Is there somebody missing?
Very good.
Oh.
Well, you did start ahead. They've got to be in here within, 10 minutes for them to have equalled your time. But they're now parked in a different village with a similar name.
Whittington.
We're not there.
We're here. Wiggington.
Wiggington?
How do you know? How do you know we're in Wiggington? It said Whittington, it didn't say Wiggington. That makes us look even more stupid. We can't even read.
Really?
Hey.
It's good of you to join us.
How nice. In a sort of 2-hour drive, you managed to fall about 50 minutes behind. Any excuse for the girls, Vix?
Well, I know, girls, what do we do in Coventry?
Like shopping in Coventry.
Oh, no!
Now, what are the men and women doing when they're engaged in this type of map reading task? One of the factors that they're doing is they're trying to mentally rotate either the map or themselves in relation to that map so they know which direction they're going in. And of all the stereotypes that we have about men and women, this is perhaps one of the clearest where the stereotype turns out to be correct. Males do tend to be better at this type of mental rotation task. And of course the result is, at the end of the day, the men got there and the women get lost.
Get that f***ing way. Hey?
Come on then, Noddy.
Get that f***ing way. We're going to straight up and just go back round. Why don't you just be a sneak and pull up between them and cut him off?
Ah, look at this lot playing right into the hands of the women who say men are overly competitive and aggressive at the helm.
Obviously, there's no place for aggression on the roads, but this cliché may explain why more men are successful at motor racing than women.
So, how better to test the limits of high-octane risk-taking than with a race? Before the race, our prof predicted that the boys, in orange, would blast through from the back, barging the girls out of the way and scream off into the lead. Then he reckoned that, having shoved the girls out of the way, they'd set about each other. And you know what? He was absolutely right.
Whatever you think about male aggression and competitiveness, the fact is, in a race, it works. The boys came home a comfortable first, second and third, with the girls bringing up the rear.
What we've seen there is that while the males start at the back, they manage to push their way through to the front places. And they do that through a combination of competitiveness and aggression. And we start to see this being expressed on the road, so that we see that males are more involved in driving violations. So while the males can get to their destination a little bit quicker than the women on average, they also get to the hospital a little bit quicker than the women.
So, what have we learned from all that lot then? Well, in 3 of our 4 tests, the clichés seem to be borne out, with only parking throwing up a surprise.
What we've seen probably won't stop men and women arguing, but it's been fun trying.
I was really pleased that the guys won the navigation test, because she's always having to go at me for not being able to read maps. And they were beaten. They were beaten by nearly an hour. That was fair and square. That's a done deal.
I'm sure he'll be having a go at me about my navigation skills now, obviously, because I can't do it.
The reverse parking is a different matter. I mean, I parked it 20 seconds, slight bink on the back, but Kelly was the fastest parker out of the boys and girls. I'm going to hear that every time we go shopping.
Bit annoyed about the whole map reading thing. We weren't too good at that, but, you know, made up for it for the hazard awareness thing. That was really good. The boys were rubbish, actually, and the girls were really good.
Beating at parking, it's the reverse parking one. I'm never going to hear the end of it. Never. Even the guys back at home, they will not shut up. I'm always ribbing her for what she does. I'm always parking for her. Now it's going to be the other way around. Can't believe it.
Tonight on Fifth Gear, it's ready, aim, fire. We're lifting the lid on the secret world of armoured cars, the must-have accessory for everyone from the Blairs to the Beckhams via Madonna.
With unprecedented access to the world's leading top-secret test lab, we'll meet the man who's one step ahead of the terrorists. Show you the difference 100 grand's worth of armour makes, and then, as an unmissable finale, demonstrate our own special brand of defensive driving.
So, if you're the kind of person that can't nip to the shops without being hassled by some terrorists in balaclavas, then stick with us.
Tuareg is the name of an athletic, resilient African tribe, known for surviving in the very harshest and most hostile of environments.
And now, it's the name of a Volkswagen.
Their first off-roadery 4x4 SUV thing, in fact. Not exactly outlandish styling, but striking enough to make the builders round our way wake me at 7 AM for a poke about. Thanks, guys. It has a, well, athletic, resilient look to survive harsh and hostile places, I suppose. But the Tuareg is going to have to survive in much posher environments, because VW is treating this as their luxury car. And you never quite forget that, because they fitted the full complement of wood and metal and leather. And actually, it's the details that set this car apart. You don't just get one sun visor, you get one for the side and one for the front. Some really groovy dials that fade up like cinema lighting. And not just a cup holder, but a rather nutty bottle holder for giant bottles of pop. There'll be a 2.5-litre diesel, a petrol V6 and also a petrol V8. But this one, the flagship model, the 50 grand car, well, this has got a V10. You see, it says so here. Now, that's like a Formula 1 car, but unlike a Formula 1 car's puny 3 litres, this one's got a whole 5. Oh, yeah, and it's a diesel. In fact, it's the most powerful diesel car in the world with 308 horsepower. Now, I know diesels aren't cool because they're bought by skinflints, but this one's fine. It only does 23 to the gallon, less than a Porsche 911.
So why on earth would you buy one? Well, there's a simple answer, and that's torque, the mysterious measure of a car's grunt. Think about power being the size of your bicep and torque being the length of your spanner. You see, the longer your spanner, the easier it is to undo the nut.
And the Touareg would undo nuts easily. That 10-cylinder engine devours hills with a massive 553 pound-feet of torque, or, even more impressively for metric viewers, 750 newton-meters. That's more than a Chrysler Viper.
And what do you think you do with all that torque? You pull things!
Like people carriers that are trying to drive in the other direction. Or the dead weight of an enormous telegraph pole. And I mean enormous. See? Or, as a finale, a combine harvester. All 7 tons of it. Dealt with as if it's just a toy. And once you've done pulling, you can go zooming, which the Touareg does very well. Thanks to clever air suspension, this is one chunky off-roader that corners like a car. Speed is a strong point too. It gets to 62 5.5 seconds faster than the diesel Range Rover, which also happens to cost a couple of grand more. And it's pedestrian friendly. Plastic wings and an aluminium bonnet ensure the softest landings in the class. It may seem odd that a top-of-the-range luxury car is diesel, but 60% of Merc S-classes sold in this country are DERV burners, so the potential for the Touareg is huge.
I suspect most people are going to go for the 2.5 litre diesel, which is exactly half this engine and about 20 grand cheaper. But then again, they wouldn't be able to pull combine harvesters, and frankly, they're missing out.
Back to bulletproof cars. Imagine you're a world leader, a diplomat, a captain of industry, or a footballer with a hairdo. The flip side to fame and fortune is the fact that you're a target. Your house is surrounded by barbed wire and bodyguards, so the obvious time to attack is when you're out and about.
Tony Blair is rumoured to have just ordered 3 new Jags from a specialist coach builder somewhere in the Midlands. Not that they'd ever risk a security breach and admit to it. Look for the telltale black banding around the glass that proves it's bulletproof.
Blair's new car will withstand high-velocity rounds that can travel at 2,000 miles an hour. Check out that Shockwave. Conversions cost around £140,000. Any more armour than that, and we're talking military specifications for the battlefield.
Some manufacturers will build you an armoured car on their own production line. Mercedes-Benz have been doing it since 1930, when they built a car for Emperor Hirohito of Japan. These days, they line their S-Guard, E-Guard, or tank-like G-Guard with high-strength steel combined with plastics. The steel stops the bullets, the plastic stops splinters entering the cabin. It all gets checked at the factory's dedicated assault testing facility.
Audi have the A6 and A8 security. Now, they don't actually advertise the fact that these cars are for sale, because they say if you're the kind of person who needs one, you'll find them.
BMW have their £200,000 7 Series protection, which can withstand armoured piercing bullets.
It also has neat options like an emergency windscreen release system, a roof lined with weapons, which we can't show you for legal reasons, and bomb-proof flooring. Even massive detonations cause just minor denting. With the passenger compartment left completely intact.
But if you're fairly sure the people trying to kill you only have access to handguns, a 3 Series protection should suffice. It'll take a hit from Dirty Harry's 44 Magnum and only cost you an extra 20 grand. The beauty of all these cars is that they look totally normal and let you blend right in. Threats take many forms, but you can order a defence for all of them.
Like the Tampa Detect system. Now, most booby traps consist of little more than a lunchbox full of Semtex and a tilt switch attached to the underside of the car with a magnet from a hi-fi speaker. But a few trusty probes will detect that the magnetic field around the car has been disturbed,
and let you know as much before you drive off.
Then there are concealed gun ports to slot your gun into. Now, these are very handy if you want to hit the assassin before he hits you. In fact, he won't know who shot him until he sees the hole in your door and then the hole in his leg.
If you're worried about a bomb being wired into your ignition circuit, then let's face it, who isn't? You should opt for the remote starting facility. It allows you to fire up the engine from a safe and sound 100 metres away. All right, ready, everyone? 3, 2, 1.
Then there are bond options, like an oil slick or metal tack dispenser. Completely illegal, but I suppose heads of state are above the law.
If that's whetted your appetite, then join us after the break when we meet the man who puts bulletproof cars to the ultimate test. Plus the no-holds-barred way to drive out of danger.
We're investigating the world of bulletproof cars, and our trail has brought us deep underground to a secret test laboratory in northern France. Weeks of tense negotiating have gained us access to the place every baddie in the world would love to come. The world's leading car armourer. The people who armour Range Rovers that are rumoured to be used by every nervous celeb, from David Beckham to Madonna.
It's here that our bulletician works to keep the Range Rover defences one step ahead of the terrorists' attacks by making ever more sophisticated bullets, lethal concoctions of high-octane gunpowder, lead cores and steel tips. Then he tests them against the armour that lines the cars.
No penetration means it's a pass, so we know, for now, the steel is ahead of the game. It's a never-ending battle, and for a couple of close-up facts, we spoke to Nick Uden, the man the rich and famous go to for advice. Nick, the thing that most people are always interested in, they're fascinated by this glass. I mean, how thick have we got here?
This is 38mm thick. This is a multi-laminate. Best quality glass comes from Italy, we find at the moment.
Normal windscreens consist of a piece of plastic sandwiched between two pieces of glass. Bulletproof glazing is the same, just made of more layers and is of a higher quality to keep it optically correct. When windows are this thick, it's easy to see why a new set of glass for a Range Rover costs £25,000.
But how have they protected the well-known weak spots of seams and joins?
Well, we thought of that. This is the whole idea of the design. What we've got here, if you look around here, we've got what we call a splashed return or overlap.
And what's that made of?
This is armoured steel.
Armoured steel lips that form a perfect seal to catch any stray rounds and stop so-called ballistic leakage.
Add in laser-cut Swedish steel all round, an anti-tamper exhaust that redirects gases if it's blocked, and a self-sealing fuel tank like the ones in helicopters, and you've got a 165 grand 4-ton Fortress.
But how does the weight affect performance? Well, this red Range Rover is standard and obviously faster to 60. Surprisingly though, the silver armoured car stops first thanks to beefier brakes. However, at high speeds, physics takes over and the extra momentum is harder to slow down. When it comes to handling a slalom, the normal car feels more composed and opens up a considerable lead. The armoured version's stiffer front anti-roll bar compensates for the extra weight, but causes the inside wheel to lift dramatically before the traction control cuts in to save you.
We also check the run-flat tyres. They're 3 times thicker than normal and let you drive for 30 miles after they've been shot. But if running away seems too defensive, join us later after the dust has settled for the 5th Gear School of Offensive Driving.
When Mercedes decide to launch a brand new sports car, quite naturally they want to do it in style, which is why they brought us here to Quinta do Lago, Portugal's playground for the rich and famous. But spectacular though it is, I'm not here to try some meaty new Merc. Because I'm here to try this tiny little one. It's the latest from Mercedes offshoot Smart. And don't laugh, it could be the answer to all our prayers. It's a rear-wheel drive, mid-engined, turbocharged sports car for under 15 grand. And it's only Insurance Group 8. First impressions? Well, it hasn't exactly got classic sports car lines, that's for sure. But believe it or not, the wheelbase is actually 1 centimetre longer than on a Porsche 911. It's just that with no overhang at either the front or the rear, it's still a very short car. I definitely don't like this very abruptly chopped off rear to the roofline. And these massive different textures of plastic and different colours certainly take a bit of getting used to. And I don't like this dark plastic around the headlamps. But that looks a bit better. It's the coupe version. And it's got this really nice glazed rear end that provides a streamlined lines that makes the roads look quite attractive. And at the same time provides a lot more luggage space in the back. So that's a more practical car. And I'm definitely a coupe man. The only question is, are these Smart Roadsters just fashion accessories? Are they real drivers' cars? The Avenida Ayrton Senna da Silva. The great man himself used to live around here. Now, I think that's Madonna's house, and Chris Evans has got a new gaff somewhere around here. It's all very smart. Enough of a tourist trip. I think it's time we find some slightly more demanding roads. I must say I'm much happier sitting inside this Smart Roadster than I was standing looking at it from the outside. It's got a really comfortable driving position with good seats and a nice funky interior to give you a good feeling. I love these little frog-eyed dials. We've got the boost there on the temperature gauge and rev counter and speedo right in front of me. And also, the top-of-the-range car, I've got all the luxuries. I've got air conditioning, I've got heated seats, we've got a trip meter down here. It really is a quality car. When you're going slower, you can back off and then listen to your turbocharge whistling away in the back. In fact, that little turbocharged engine is surprisingly responsive. It gets up and wants to go. Bored out to 700cc, the three-cylinder power plant now produces 80 bhp and an almost respectable 0 to 60 in 10.9 seconds. But it still only comes with its annoyingly reluctant semi-automatic gearbox. And so to the end of our little Portuguese adventure, where this Smart Roadster has turned out to be something of a surprise. It's certainly a lot more sports car than it is fashion accessory, and sure to provide plenty of funky fun to all sorts of generations. Sadly, though, it's not quite for me, because I just can't get used to that ugly snout, nor, improved though it is, could I ever live with that gearbox. Earlier, we saw how VIPs protect themselves by armouring their cars. But, of course, that is only half the story, as you still need a highly trained driver.
Normally, defensive driving is a non-contact sport. But in some cases, experts recommend the use of reasonable force.
I've always maintained the best form of defence is attack. So, welcome to the Fifth Gear School of Offensive Driving.
You know how it is. Some flipping activist in front is trying to slow your progress and get you to swerve off the road. But don't go down the Hollywood route and bash them from the side, because you just break your steering. Instead, you've got to hit them from exactly the right angle from behind. Go get him, Tiff!
A simple, well-timed tap with a bit of sideways motion will send the bad guy helter-skeltering out of the way.
You know how Tiff prefers oversteer to understeer? Well, there's a perfectly good reason. All those machine gun nests you find on the exit of fast bends can be taken care of with a deft swipe.
Any frontal impact will slow you down, so just kick the back out for a glancing blow to maintain your getaway speed.
Never mind all that tricky business of leaning out the window trying to shoot at persistent pursuers. Just hit the brakes, line yourself up and reverse into them. One punctured radiator later and you can carry on your merry way. Try fitting a tow bar for extra effect.
Picture the scene. Cornered by revolutionaries, most experts will tell you to use the J-turn as a means of escape. How cowardly. Use it as a means of attack. Let's have it, Tiff.
The trick here is to be brave. Reverse flicking a 4x4 isn't to be advised, as you need maximum speed in reverse and it usually ends up on 2 wheels. It also usually means a new wing.
So there you go, a few handy manoeuvres for keeping the bad guys at bay, and a fair bit cheaper than forking out for all that armour.
If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find him, maybe you can hire Needles. Let's roll.
Tonight's Fifth Gear is a whirlwind trip around the globe.
To bring you the ultimate driving experiences.
VBH has been to Italy with the ultimate in Exotica, deciding whether it's a hit or a very expensive miss. Can you guess what it is?
Tiff's been to France to drive the ultimate hatchback, but again, is it a hit or is it a miss? Adrian's found his way to Northumberland and a 150-mile-an-hour cart. Then, as a finale, Tiff and I are deep into track day territory to drive the ultimate saloons, and this time it's you who'll decide what's best. 4 missions, 12,000 miles, combined metal worth £1 million.
And not a moment to lose.
Italy has never been short of serious drivers' cars, and what an opportunity to have one of my favourites, the Lamborghini Murcielago, and an empty Monza circuit to play with. But I'm teasing you, because today I'd rather tear myself away and go down the road to a grubby industrial estate, the unlikely home of an even more delicious prospect. So, you're Pagani, you make the Zonda, the first choice in a dream garage, the last word in Exotica. Everyone who goes near it says it's just about perfect. And you know, because you always paid attention in sports car class, that the very last thing you should do is upset the delicate handling balance by chopping the roof off. So, what are they going to do? Chop the roof off. Doof. As any Lego expert will tell you, removing one side means everything goes wobbly. Fine for the playroom, but lousy for cars. No rigidity ruins the subtle chassis characteristics your reputation is built on. And the problems of prancing around topless don't stop there. No roof guarantees scuttle shake, where a bump in the road will cause the whole cabin to rattle and roll. So if you ask me if the Zonda Roadster is going to be a hit or a miss, I'd have to say I miss. But I'm just going to check. No more than 40 of these Roadsters will ever be made, but given that so far only 35 coupes have been delivered, they won't reach that limit in a hurry. You can specify practically anything you want, from 1,000 shades of silver to rare leathers like this ostrich hide. Even the tyres are specially made for the Zonda by Michelin. The finish everywhere is exquisite. Just drink in the details. Then there's the roof, which cleverly stays in the front, and would be a bit fiddly to erect in a hurry if it wasn't for some expert help from Signor Pagani himself. This is the first Roadster to be built and has been bought by a German who made his fortune in pneumatic valves. It should complement his coupe perfectly, lucky devil. Pagani kindly said we could have a go as long as I didn't do Tief-Nidel-style driving. Spoil sports. Still, Tiff-style driving or not, I was going to head for the open road as quickly as possible. Most Zonda torque revolves around its 7.3-litre V12 and 220 miles an hour top speed, but no one ever mentions quite what a pussycat it is to cruise around in. Purring round sleepy Italian villages puts thoughts of hits and misses to the back of your mind. This is definitely one of life's treats, so I'd better try and share the experience as best I can. Well, the clutch is heavy, but it's not really a problem. The gear change is mechanical, but well oiled. The steering wheel is chunky, but it's got a remarkably delicate feel to it. And the brakes are heavy bits of kit. It feels as though you're putting your foot directly onto the discs. The seats are designed to the owner's unique body, so they will fit in all the right places. The dimensions, though, of the car, it is very wide and very long, and it's quite difficult to get used to. These door mirror antennae give a beautiful view at the rear. And up front, well, everyone just gets out of your way. As this man in a green van is proving by crossing the white line. Then, of course, there's a noise, which, well, goes like this. You'll be even more pleased to hear that the missing roof doesn't mean a cabin full of rattles or squeaks. You might as well be in the coupe. I can't tell you if the handling on the limit is affected. I was merely running the car in, but I can tell you it felt composed, sorted and rock solid. The chassis and body are so stiff anyway that losing the roof is not a problem. It's all down to the precision of the boys back at the factory. Their carbon work is second to none, and so impressive, one Sicilian customer bought them all a $1,000 dinner as an extra special thank you. The Pagani Roadster will cost you €481,500 plus local taxes, which means if you sign today, £382,961 sterling. If you've got that kind of money lying around, I suggest you scoop it up and buy one. Then feel free to marry me. Zonda Roadster, hit or miss. I was a little worried, but on a warm Sunday in Italy, it can only be a definite hit.
Right, from Italy to France, to find out if a promise has finally turned into a reality. A couple of years ago, Renault got us all very excited. They pumped up a Clio, made it rear-wheel drive and crammed it full of V6. While most journalists were happy enough with the mid-engine concept and outrageous wide body, they belittled its 230 horsepower that could only drag it to 60 in 6.4 seconds. The Clio V6 had committed a cardinal sin. It looked faster than it was. So they brought us back to Renault Land to meet V6 Mark II. Visibly different thanks to its new Clio nose and these titanium-coloured air scoops. But what matters most is what they changed back here, both inside the engine and underneath it. You see, the problem wasn't just a lack of power, but also a lack of a well-balanced chassis. Basically, it handled like an old Porsche 911 with a light understeery front that suddenly swapped to a backwards into the hedge affair.
The engine has been sort of sorted with a new camshaft and a few techie things which bring the power up to 255 bhp and the 0 to 60 down to a far more respectable 5.8 seconds. Aided by a slicker shift and shorter ratios, it certainly feels a lot more lively. Plus, they've done a bit more playful tuning with the air intake. So, as the rev counter winds its way round to that 7,200 limit, it sounds faster.
Sorting the handling isn't quite so simple though, and a whole new rear subframe assembly has been created which, allied to a stiffer front anti-roll bar and firmer springing all-round, promises to do the job.
You see, the revised suspension geometry keeps the rear wheels at their optimum camber for longer, and the increased firmness reduces the amount of weight transferred during cornering, braking and accelerating, so providing a more stable platform. Simple, isn't it? Mind you, it is hard to tell the difference in everyday use, but you are soon aware of one change that hasn't been made.
The V6 Clio still offers precious little lock, and a 3-point turn usually takes 5. Now, most buyers will have them as toys. And where do you play with toys? On tracks.
Unfortunately, the racetrack supplied by Renault, the Circuit du Albi, is either very fast or very slow, thanks to some strategically placed chicanes, and neither is really ideal to put this car to the test. But what I can tell you is that this Renault now has a massive amount of rear-end grip, and with that firmer suspension doing its job admirably, it's actually pretty hard to unsettle it, even if you want to. As before, if you enter a corner a bit too quickly, you'll find the front end pushing wide, but now when you lift off to solve the problem, it doesn't suddenly snap into a big oversteer and send you sideways, which is a good job considering that limited amount of lock, which made it very difficult to catch in the old V6. But unfortunately, neither have they provided the V6 with a little bit of power oversteer, which you want to put a smile on your face. So it's now a much, much safer car on track, but not really any more fun.
On sale in Britain in July with a price tag of £27,000, it won't outrun the Imprezas and Evos of this world. But if it's a stylish coupe you're looking for, and let's face it, this Clio is a lot more than a hot hatch, then the V6 is a much better choice for the enthusiast than the trendy Audi TT.
But that doesn't mean I'd buy one. Like it though I do, come October, the new Nissan 350Z arrives, and that's got more power and handles better. So, hit or miss? Well, let's settle for a near hit, shall we?
After the break, your chance to decide which is best, the Subaru Impreza WRX STI or the Mitsubishi Evo 8.
Ah, the jet engine. Sir Frank Whittle's finest invention, and perfect for what it was designed for, getting an aeroplane into the air. But two engineers from Yorkshire have decided to do something you wouldn't dare think possible. Yes, that's right. They've decided to strap a jet engine onto a go-kart. They must be mad. The two engineers in question are Chai Wright and Henry Donald, a pair of likely lads from Hebden Bridge with an imaginative taste in toys.
Well, the reason we put this thing together was at first it was just really a laugh. That was, you know, as straightforward as that. We've been already messing with other karts, motorcycle engines, what have you. Quite fast, good fun. And this engine came along and we thought, well, we just got to try it.
The engine originally came from a Phantom
It was a starter motor for a Phantom jet.
And that's not all. This engine was actually used on the land speed record-breaking Thrust SSC, one of a pair bought at auction for £1,000. And the military origins meant the workshop manuals were covered by the Official Secrets Act.
We've actually tried to keep as much of the standard kart chassis, the brakes, steering and everything is pure kart. To keep it, you know, as a standard kart, so it can go for a record.
And setting a new world record is exactly what we're going to do today, with an official timekeeper to record the speed. Now it's about to start up, here are a few facts. It runs on kerosene just like an aeroplane and does 1 mile to the gallon. Power may not sound much at 100 bhp, but it doesn't weigh anything, so the power-to-weight ratio is phenomenal. The engine drives a drive chain which turns the wheels, rather than being powered by thrust. It's got an afterburner, mainly for looks, and it's very, very loud. But what you want to know is, how fast is it? Well, let's find out. Right, now he's on his way, I'll just explain. I'm here with Trevor and his high-tech gadgetry. Now, what happens here is that the car brakes a light beam and starts the timer, travels a quarter of a mile down the runway, brakes a second light beam which stops the timer, and this box of tricks works at the maximum speed. ...143.7 miles an hour. Congratulations, boys. You're now officially the owners of the fastest gas-powered turbine go-kart in the world. But setting a world record has meant running the engine on the limit at least 2,000 degrees centigrade. For a moment, they thought they'd blown it. But in the end, relief. The only damage was sizzling paintwork. These boys love their engines, and they're not going to stop at this kart. They plan to build a whole variety of jet cars, with engines up to 1,600 bhp, so they can take passengers along and demonstrate the thrill of jet power. I've got a feeling we'll be seeing more of Chai and Henry's record-breaking creations.
We've been bringing you some extreme driving experiences from around the world. You've seen a £380,000 Zonda Roadster strolling round Italy. You've seen a V6 Clio roaring round France. But now, fight fans, we're back home. The only place in the world you'll see these two squaring up to each other. The Type UK Subaru Impreza STI and the Mitsubishi Evo 8. They're the latest in the line from these arch rivals, each with their own new set of tiny developments to try to outsmart the other.
But this time there's one major development too, a price cut. Both cars are about £3,000 cheaper than their predecessors, which is like having a year's worth of tyres, insurance and fuel for free. But are they hits or are they misses? We'll thoroughly spank each car and at the end ask you to ring a number to vote for your favourite. And if you answer a simple question, you can have the chance of a driving day with a victorious car. Let the campaigning begin.
Styling first. Now, these are not handsome cars. They are not a deft flick of a designer's pen. Let's face it, they're ugly. But because they're plastered in designer labels, they send out all the right signals. Which would you rather look at on your driveway?
You can spot the Evo 8 by this new carbon fibre spoiler, techie lights and 17-inch alloys. And come up the front, hurry up. A sharper nose. It's a cleaner, simpler looking Evo.
The Impreza, meanwhile, has beefed up. They've muscled out the wings, changed the power bulge for a post box, and replaced those ridiculously ugly front headlamps with slightly less ugly ones.
The Impreza's interior is very good, though, from the racy pedals to clear dials and a generally solid feel, while the Evo is a much more drab affair, boring pedals, cramped instruments and trim that's just too easy to pull apart.
But then the most important bit is under here. This is the top-of-the-range FQ300. It's basically a standard Evo 8 with more power added after registration to sidestep emissions regulations.
This is the top-of-the-range STI PPP, or ProDrive Performance Pack, which again adds more power after registration to sidestep those regulations. Both cars are four-wheel drive and both have 2-litre four-cylinder turbocharged engines. But the similarities end there.
Welcome to Fact Pack Top Trumps. Power.
301. You?
301. Torque.
299.
300. Yes! By one! I beat you by one. 0 to 60.
4.6 seconds. You?
It only says 0 to 62 and it says 4.9 seconds estimate. So I'd call that a draw. MPG.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, no, you're right.
Top speed, though. It says here in excess of 155.
I'm limited to 157.
So no winner there, then.
No. All right, then, the big one. Price.
27 grand.
29.
So that'll be an extra £2,000 for me to play with.
Which you will spend on me, because you love me.
If you could beat me and my Impreza first. From the driver's point of view, little has really changed with the Impreza. Got the same great driving position, but I could do without this pink lettering on the steering wheel. But it's still got fabulous, Vicky, fade-free brakes and this great 6-speed gearbox, which is so enjoyable to use. Handling-wise, again, like the previous STI, it's got diffs at the front and rear, but although that does pull the nose in a bit better than it used to, it's still more understeer than you'd want it to. The Impreza, Vicky. I'll sort her out. Well, what I was trying to say before Vicky rudely interrupted was that the nose still seems to wash out in the corners, while the Evo bites into the turn and lifts a wheel, whereas the STI runs wide. But there is, of course, one way to get rid of the understeer. And that's to give it a bit of the old rally driver's flick. I just can't resist it. 100 miles an hour! And a little bit of a slide. And just to prove it wasn't a fluke, here we go again.
Right, my turn, and the Evo. This new 6-speed gearbox isn't quite to my liking. You don't really know where you are with it, and when you need to change down quickly when we're coming into this corner, you're not quite sure if it's gone into gear or not, and the brakes, which are a bit wooden to start with, heat up when you've done a couple of laps and just sort of fade away, really. Luckily, though, the handling more than makes up for it, thanks to some rather clever differential technology. This car has got super active yaw control and an active centre diff, which means, basically, it can do this. Tail-happy cornering, thanks to computers that split the torque between the rear wheels to minimise understeer. Grab it by the scruff of the neck and its opposite lock for fun.
Hello and welcome to a Fifth Gear special on sports cars.
We will reveal what we think is the best sports car in the world.
And we'll also be telling you how to buy one on the cheap.
But first, what actually is a sports car?
How about Lamborghini's awesome Murcielago? Sorry, no, it's four-wheel drive.
And Pagani's Zonda doesn't count either. There may be a Roadster now, but it was originally conceived as a tin top.
So out goes Porsche's amazing 911 Turbo. It's got a roof and four-wheel drive.
And even my favourite, the Ferrari 360 Modena, doesn't come into the true sports car bracket.
Because this is a sports car. It's a 1958 Austin Healey Frog Eye Sprite. It may not have a V12 under the bonnet or one of those prancing horses on the front, but it's got everything that a proper sports car should have. It's manual, rear-wheel drive, and was designed and launched purely as an open-top car. It hasn't got one of those cumbersome retractable hardtops, and it's not some coupe or saloon with a roof chopped off. You see, a sports car doesn't need to have stealth fighter styling, sledgehammer power, fancy trim, or an exotic price tag. It just has to make you smile.
But let's not get carried away with nostalgia. The Sprite is hopeless by modern standards. There are no brakes, it's a liability in cold weather, and with 43 horsepower, it's about as quick as a milk float. But thankfully, we've come a long way since 1958.
And this is where we are today.
We've gathered together what we believe to be the best sports cars on sale in Britain.
All are rear-wheel drive, have manual gearboxes and have been designed and launched as sports cars. What's more, they have easy access to the sun and have been created with the sole intention of having lots of fun.
But which one's best? Which one ticks all those boxes? B-road thrills, practicality, value, lots of pedigree, lots of style, and can give you a big rush round a circuit. Which is the world's best sports car?
Well, when it comes to blatting round a circuit, no car does it better than this, the Radical SR3. And don't be fooled into thinking it's only for the track, because this piece of paper here means it's road legal. And just to prove it, I'm going to take it to the shops.
The Radical is the closest thing you get to a racing car on the road. Under that huge air intake, there's only a 1.3-litre motorbike engine. But because the Radical weighs just 500 kilos, it's frighteningly fast. 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds fast. In fact, it's the fastest car I've ever been shopping in.
You see, we're in Tunbridge Wells High Street, stomping ground of the posh. And if I apply just one picojoule of pressure too much to the throttle, we'll end up in some green welly shop.
You're always aware that just one false prod of the pedal will send you hurtling down the high street at race car speeds.
I've never felt an experience like it. I'm only going 17 miles an hour. Both my legs are shaking. My heart's beating like a steam train. My mouth's so dry, my tongue is stuck to the roof of my mouth. And I'm absolutely terrified and a bit excited at the same time. I just don't want to stuff it.
I needed to get out of town and onto a track with an expert.
So I've employed the services of Tiff to explore its full potential. OK, Tiff, let's have it. I think you ought to tighten your seatbelts, Adrian.
Tiff! No! No! Tiff! This is terrifying! I've never been so frightened in all my life! I want to get out! I'm speechless! I'm really sick! I'm just feel so...
What Adrian is trying to say is that apparently he isn't overly impressed with the slick change of the 6-speed sequential motorbike gearbox, the instant reaction to every twitch of the steering wheel, and a few minutes living on the edge. With just 1300cc, the Radical will lap any racetrack in Britain faster than the fastest of supercars.
I've never ever had an experience like that before in my life. That was absolutely awful.
I'm sorry, Tiff, this can't be the best sports car in the world. You'd have to be a dedicated masochist to use one every day, and it only makes sense if you're into hardcore track action.
Now if, like Adrian, you find the Radical a little excessive, there is an alternative.
Caterham have been building their classic Lotus 7 replica for years. It is better on the road than the Radical because it's got proper road suspension and no silly spoilers to grind you out over speed bumps. But on an everyday practical level, neither of them are particularly brilliant.
So join us in part 2 when we continue our quest for the best sports car in the world, and I will tell you how to buy it for buttons.
And I'll be showing you how to drive the wheels off it.
Welcome back to our quest to find the best sports car in the world.
Now, normally I don't like BMWs. In fact, I hate them. But since we had to choose a sports car that's currently on sale today, this is the nearest thing I could find to a Cobra or an E-Type. Long bonnet, epic engine, convertible, rear-wheel drive. It's not perfect. It has that nasty, common BMW badge on the bonnet, and look inside, and the interior is like Liberace's bedroom. But, and it is a huge but, this car is bonkers fast. It is Holy Mary, Mother of God and all the saints quick. I'm talking 0 to 100 miles an hour in 11 seconds dead.
It also has the looks to stop a speeding train, plus the best product placement of any car in the world, seen by billions sawn in half in a James Bond film.
When this car came out, every BMW dealer was forced to buy some for the showroom, flagship BMW, etc., etc. And you know what? They couldn't sell them, hardly surprising at 80 big ones. Now, I know for a fact that if you're an aggressive negotiator and you walked into a BM showroom with readies, you'd probably buy a brand new one of these for, are you sitting down, £55,000. Okay, we've got a bit of value there. But if you found, say, a private buyer who's got one of these and the car's maybe done 15,000 miles, 20,000 miles, you could expect to pay £45,000. Now that is when this car, BMW or not, left-hand drive or not, starts to get really, really interesting.
So, a sports car with one of the best V8s in the world for just over half its sticker price. What are we waiting for?
Yes, Quentin, but let's get back to real sports cars for real people. To be honest, it's not that difficult to match the Z8's performance for a lot less cash. Now, it would be pretty easy for me to convince you that the Mazda MX-5 is the best sports car in the world. Not only did it dramatically spark the sports car market back into life in the 90s, but it still feels pretty quick. It's fun and easy to drive. It is reliable, and it's still good value, with prices starting at around £15,000. But here and now, it feels a bit too old school, and visually, it would only cause a stir if you'd never seen a car before. If you don't mind not having a boot, then the Toyota MR2 makes a more modern choice. Not only is it superior eye candy, but its handling is sharper than the Mazdas. Plus, we've seen them on sale in car supermarkets for the same price, 15 grand. It is a good option, but for an extra £10,000, you can go for some hardcore homegrown talent in the form of a Lotus. This Elise 111S has bucketfuls of pedigree, great presence and sensational styling. It is brilliant. But there's just one small problem. Lotus don't sell the best Elise anymore. Vauxhall do. You see, the Vauxhall VX220 is actually an Elise underneath. Why it's better has nothing to do with the styling. It's all about a new, more powerful, smoother 2-litre turbocharged engine. And it makes the Elise the sports car that it always should have been.
Never thought I'd see her go. She learned I loved her today.
Whereas the Lotus is ultimately more fun on a track, this is quicker than a similarly priced Elise. Tiff won't like the fact that it gets its oomph from an unnatural source, a turbo, but there's no denying that it's pushing all my buttons at the moment. The steering is super quick and it's got lots of feedback. Plus, you don't really get the feeling that the car's going to snap back at you, which is a good thing. The engine is also quieter than the Lotus's, and this car benefits from ABS and an airbag, which may sound nanny-ish to some, but on a day-to-day safety basis, it makes sense. And with 60 coming in under 5 seconds, so does the £25.5 grand asking price. But what am I saying? On a day-to-day basis, you would be driven nuts by the lack of comfort, the frustratingly fiddly roof, and the fact that it is very difficult to get in and out of. It's still not user-friendly enough to be the best sports car in the world. If you want something that's easier to live with, much more civilised and under £30,000, BMW Z4 will be with us later this year. I drove one last October and it didn't disappoint. It's got a great chassis, fabulous engines, and even the controversial flame surface styling has grown on me, but it's not here yet. In the meantime, a very good candidate is this, Honda's S2000. Now, when I first saw the £26,000 Honda, I couldn't quite see what all the fuss was about. It didn't strike me as a particularly pretty car, and it had a dismally dark interior. But then something happened. I hit 6,000 RPM, and that's when Honda's VTEC kicks in. You see, most cars run out of puff at about 6,000 to 7,000 revs, but that's when this one starts to party. And then you realise that the interior isn't boring, it's just incredibly driver-focused. Everything from the stereo to the heater is just a finger flick away. So, is it the best sports car in the world? Well, its strength is also its weakness. That mental engine can only really be enjoyed at race car speeds, and if you thrash it, you're always at risk of losing your licence.
Well, this TVR Temora doesn't even have to move to make it feel like a real sports car. But it would be a shame not to take it for a little spin. It's much further up the price scale at 36 grand, but in terms of driver aids, it's back with the race-bred Elise. So there's no electric roof, no airbags, and no ABS or traction control to dilute the driving experience, which is a bit of a worry because with 350 bhp, it's got twice the power of the Lotus. But with a car that looks and sounds like this, who cares? Like the Honda, the TVR has its entire interior devoted to the business of driving, with everything cowled round towards me. But unlike its Japanese rivals, I'm delighted to see that the boys from Blackpool have yet to discover the pleasures of plastic. Indeed, there isn't a single piece of it anywhere to be seen. Instead, there's a deluge of leather, aluminium and suede, all centred around these fantastic dials, which in true TVR tradition provide all the basic information in a sort of arse-about-face way, with the rev counter on the right moving anti-clockwise and the speedo providing as little information as possible. But it's still brilliant because, along with the sound of that engine, you can never forget you're in a TVR.
Unfortunately, much as I love the TVR Temora's outlandish styling and brutish nature, its lack of driver aids and boisterous character won't be for everyone.
So, which is our favourite sports car in the world?
Well, it needs to be as cool as BMW's Z8, as awe-inspiring as the Temora, while still feeling as focused and as well built as Honda's S2000.
And it has to offer the same sort of top value as the MR2 and MX-5, and have the same sort of pedigree
as the Elise.
And it needs to be as chuckable as the VX220 and also usable for the odd track day, so it can mix it with the Caterhams and Radicals of this world.
And on Fifth Gear, we agree there is still only one car that can do all of that. The Porsche Boxster.
It may have been on sale for 6 years, and it may not seem to know its front from its rear, but nothing we've tested can beat it. Like its sister, the 911, the Boxster can revel in being redlined on a mountain road as happily as it can cope with a daily commute.
The interior may not be the most exotic, but it is the most comfortable of all these cars and still feels brilliantly built and entirely focused on driver fun. And let's not forget that it's also the most practical car here with, yes, 2 boots.
OK, at just over £38,000, this range-topping 3.2S isn't exactly cheap. But it oozes so much quality. We all agree it's still great value for money.
While Tiff reacquaints himself with Porsche's finest, I'm going to tell you why the Boxster makes the best used sports car in the world. Now, here is one we literally prepared earlier. We found it in the classifieds, fair and square. It's a 97, done 40,000 miles, mint car, full service history, 2.5 Tiptronic, and it's just been sold for 18,500 quid, making it a very cheap car. And hopefully demonstrating admirably that, believe it or not, there are still used Porsche Boxster bargains out there. So here's the bottom line. In the world of sports cars, this little car is one of the slowest depreciators, one of the fastest sellers, one of the most reliable, one of the cheapest, relatively speaking, to own and buy, and the one that has so little that goes wrong. So here is your handy Porsche Boxster used buying guide.
Check that the spec on the underbonnet identification sticker matches the car. Don't bother opting for a left-hand drive, they're slightly cheaper but trickier to sell on, and a foreign service history is harder to check. Mercifully, the interior is bulletproof. These seats have had 6 years' worth of bottoms and look nearly new. Don't forget that this is a quick car, so check for signs of crash damage. This one has yet to see a respray, with all the factory stickers and shuck lines exactly where they should be. The hood is electric, so make sure it still works, and pre-2003 cars had a plastic rear screen, so check that it's not cracked or yellow and that the alloys and tyres look like these. The single-pipe 2.5 or 2.7s are more economical and, on average, cost £4,000 less than the 3.2s.
In fact, so wholesomely sensible and practical that even your mother would approve. But before you start heading for the classifieds like heat-seeking missiles, Tiff, who should have found a racing circuit by now, is about to remind us what owning one of these rinky-tink little roadsters really is all about.
So what makes the Porsche Boxster so good? The driving position is just right. The steering wheel, a tad on the large side, one has to say, but it enables you to better see the beautiful dials just underneath them with the rev counter right in the middle. And the fact that there's also a little digital speedo which says I'm doing 65 miles an hour as I turn into this corner and then spin off. But that was merely because I was talking to you see, and I got the rear wheels on the grass, and, well, I spun. I mean, spinning happens, especially when you're allowed the Anglesey racing circuit to play on. But then again, there's that lovely engine tone behind you. That classic Porsche tone that's actually been tuned so it gives just the right noise without being noisy. Then there's that handling balance, which, although maybe a little bit over the top, is generally neutral. It's mid-engine, the steering, communications, everything you could want. You do need to concentrate, obviously, on a circuit. And there's a 6-speed gearbox, which just flips between ratios. That's where we spun last time, and we nearly spun again. And the fact that I can have so much track day fun with only 260 horsepower shows you don't need brutal power if the balance is right. What's so good about the Porsche? All I can think is everything.
Next week, we're in Iceland, deep and crisp and even on Europe's highest glacier. Sampling £250,000 worth of Maybach and testing Aston Martin's new DB7 GT. Very pretty, very fast, and very, very horny.
In this week's Fifth Gear, Adrian's in £250,000 worth of Maybach limo.
And what on earth have they done to the world's best executive saloon? Tom's driving BMW's not-so-pretty new 5 Series.
We're a nation in love with 4x4s. The market for off-roaders is ballooning and sales in Britain are up 20% this year.
We don't mind the lousy fuel consumption, the parking difficulties or the expense of running them because they are our own personal tanks.
We like the idea that the lofty driving position and acres of metal will protect us in an impact. Research in America says that when a small car and a big 4x4 collide, you're 24 times more likely to die in the car than in the 4x4.
And for those with kids, the desire to get an advantage in the highway arms race is even stronger. The result is that they clutter every school run in the land. But there's always been a lingering doubt.
A little nag in the back of our minds that surely something so high is more likely to roll over. And then how safe will we be? All it takes is something in the road to cause you to swerve, and, as Richard Branson found out in his Range Rover, it can all go horribly wrong.
So we've decided to take the bull bar by the horns and find out exactly how easy it is to roll a typical 4x4. We've got one stuntman, one runway, one emergency manoeuvre. What do you think will happen?
Join us later to find out.
Something momentous is coming. The most crucial new car of the year is about to be launched, and it's impossible to overstate its importance. Some have hailed its arrival as tantamount to the second coming. I couldn't wait to set eyes on it. But when I did... Run! It's a new BMW 5 Series! Don't look at it! Run! Well, I'm afraid my first impressions of the new 5 Series were less than positive. Mr. BMW claims styling like this will be all the rage in the future. Trouble is, this is now.
Somebody should tell BMW this isn't funny anymore. It's all very well making the 7 Series look ugly, because you're probably going to buy an S-Class Merc or a Jag anyway. Thing is, if you're going to make something as staggeringly important as the 5 Series look troubled, you're going to start peeing people off.
The old 5 Series was 7 years old, but still the undisputed champion of the world. By rights, this car should raise the bar even higher and annihilate the opposition. Instead, rivals are smelling blood.
I'll tell you why I think this looks funny. The big bum. They were thinking J-Lo, I'm thinking Fat Farm.
I mean, take a look at this, Mr. Cameraman. It's got loads of intersecting angles. It looks like lots of cars all stuck together at once. And, excuse me, see this rear overhang? Well, it's too long for the car. It's too big for the size of wheel, and it makes it look heavy. As for this swage line that you can see running all the way down here, well, it's really heavy. It drags the car down in profile, makes it look too fat. When you get to the front, though, well, actually, that's really cool. Come and have a look. It's almost as if this car is wearing a giant pair of wraparound shades. Very, very funky, very stylish. But it's not enough to forgive that side profile. By God, this thing is going to have to be good underneath. Just like ugly girls have to be dirty.
So what can Stuart in sales with the amusing tie boast about if his car hasn't got dazzling film-style looks? Well, managing to be bigger and lighter is a neat trick. There's glorious build quality everywhere. Oh. And the benefit of that big bum is a boot large enough for 4 golf bags. If that doesn't impress your mates, the options will. Like the £880 active steering, which at low speeds will give you full lock with just under a turn of the steering wheel. U-turns are easy peasy. The interior humidity is climate controlled, preventing mucous membranes from going dry, i.e. your snot never goes crusty. Adaptive headlamps are £900 and link to the steering and light your way round corners, a mere 35 years after the Citroën DS first thought of it. Now, keen viewers know how I find the iDrive system on the 7 Series distracting. Ah! Well, no such problems with the 5. It has a much simpler Play School version, with lots of lovely graphics to help tune the radio, or indeed warm the seats. And coolest of all, £900 will buy a head-up display, like a real-deal fighter pilot. But are all these things a fiendish plot of smoke and mirrors distracting me from the key issue? The 5 Series has always offered a consummate driving experience. So does it still? Well, the first thing to report is the sheer loveliness of this engine. It's a 3-litre straight-six in this 530i, and it's as smooth as buttered... butter. Thing is, it doesn't feel that fast, but crucially, it's smoother and more powerful than the V6 unit they put in the Merc E-Class. You can get a 6-speed manual, a 6-speed automatic, or an SMG semi-automatic paddle shift gearbox. There are a few more engines on the way though, and the one to watch out for is the 500 horsepower V10 M5, which should put the frighteners on things like jets and slow missiles. Now, this active steering that's so useful in car parks gets much less sensitive when you go a bit faster. Thing is, it takes some getting used to. It doesn't feel particularly numb or artificial, but you do know that something's going on. It's linked to the stability control, and if it senses the car might wag its tail, applies a tiny amount of corrective steering to dampen the wiggle. Theoretically, it means the DSC doesn't have to cut in so early and apply the brakes, which keeps cornering much zoomier. But if all that sounds too intrusive, fear not. You can turn it off. Prices for the 530 will be around £30,000 when it arrives in September. In a nutshell, you have to say that even if it's not very pretty, it is dead brainy.
Look, you got to ask yourself, do you want to turn up to a party and say, meet my wife? I know she's really ugly, but she is very clever. Or would you like to turn up to that same party and say, meet my wife? And yes, she is a supermodel. Face it, we're shallow people. Looks are everything. And BMW, well, I'm not sure they've got it right. But thing is, a Merc E-Class, well, it's plasticky and dead clinical inside. A Jag, well, that's for old men, and the A6, it's just old. So are you going to buy a 5? Well, you are, because BMW's got you over a barrel. It's still the class leader.
Mrs. Ugly wins.
Two weeks ago, we were playing with the Subaru Impreza WRX STI and the Mitsubishi Evo 8. We drove them into the ground and established that the Impreza had the better interior, gearbox and brakes, while the Evo had the edge when it came to the all-important handling. But we asked you to choose the winner, and the results are now in. The Evo took 33% of the votes, and the Impreza scored 67%, so the Impreza is your winner by a 2-to-1 majority. And lucky old David Breer from Leeds is a winner too. His name was first out of the hat, so he wins a fantastic day thrashing the pants off the victorious Impreza, courtesy of Subaru. Just for the record, Tiff and I fancy the Evo more. When will you learn? Coming up, it's a rollover. Or is it? Join us after the break to find out what it takes to topple a 4x4.
Imagine you're Mercedes. Luxury is what you do best. But then you learn that arch rivals BMW have bought one of the most opulent car names in the world, Rolls-Royce. And they've been busy working on the recently launched Phantom, possibly the most luxurious car in the world. Yes, yes, Quinton, the Rolls looks very nice, just like your jacket. And you really must lend me that CD of classical music sometime. Nice one. Anyway, what do Mercedes do in reply? Well, they dredged their corporate history and came up with this, the Maybach.
Well, there are actually two Maybachs, the Giant 62 and this compact 5.7 metre version. It weighs 3 tonnes, comes with 550 horsepower and can be yours for just under $250,000.
And if you think that's enough stats, just look what I've got to play with in here. There are 100 different pieces of wood throughout the cabin.
And it's not of the fake variety. Apparently, it takes 20 work stages to join millimetre-thick veneers with fine aluminium inlays before adding a final layer of cherry or walnut. Nice one.
Not only have the Germans wiped out loads of forests, they've also killed plenty of cows too. But what else do you get apart from wood and leather? Well, there are 2 telephones. There's a fridge buried beneath here. A cigar humidor down here. Somewhere to put the old champers and a couple of flutes for the lucky passenger. A DVD player. If I operate this button, there's some natty blinds behind me. And there's a set of dials so you can keep a check on how the driver's doing. Plus there are 10 airbags, a 600-watt stereo system with 21 speakers, and each seat has Dolby surround sound. And if I delve down here, there's also a table. Plus, if you go for the longer stretch version, which costs £265,000, you get a set of beds, just like on a VW camper. Hi caramba. Plus, it gets even better. Every car comes with its own virtual butler, which you can call and use to book theatre tickets, reserve airline seats, and anything else that's beneath you. The Maybach is just as impressive for what you don't get as well as what you do get. There's absolutely no road noise, and it's so well insulated. Well, we're in central London, and all I can hear is the whisper of the air conditioning. And there's not a peep from the engine, and that is staggering because underneath this bonnet is a 5.5 litre V12 bi-turbo lump that has the highest torque and power output of any series production car. But the really bonkers bit is that engine will get all 2.7 tonnes of this car from 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds. 5.2 seconds!
That leaves the Phantom a whole half second behind. So what do you think of that, Rolls-Royce? But don't be fooled into thinking that £250,000 suddenly entitles you to exclusivity. Apart from the stunning ride and that giant laxative of an engine, lesser mortals in their Merc S&E classes can all buy into the Maybach 57's technology, such as Sensortronic brakes, air suspension and voice-activated controls for a fraction of the price, which is annoying for this kind of money.
So what do we think of the Maybach? Well, for my money, the 57 is a bit too much like a chunky S-Class, albeit a very good one.
If you want one of these cars, however, my advice is to go for the Stretch 62 with everything on it, because in that very special car, Mercedes might just have something to make Rolls-Royce's eyes water.
This is COG, the car ad unlike any other car ad, that's made us forget in an instant Vorsprung durch Technik, Peugeots in Fields of Flames, Papa and Nicole. It's currently entertaining the world in a commercial break near you, and it's remarkable because there are no special effects or computer tricks involved. It's all done for real. A team of engineers and sculptors stripped two Honda Accords to the bare bones, chose 85 key components and then toiled on a script for a month. After 6 more months of painstaking drawing and testing, they were finally ready to film. But all did not go according to plan. Just being a few millimetres out would ruin the momentum of the chain reaction and mean a complete reset. In fact, they went without sleep for 4 days, doing 606 takes before everything finally worked as it should. The best bits have to be the wheels that climb uphill thanks to precisely laid weights, and the rain-sensitive wipers that crab across the floor. Critics are sure that despite its relatively low £750,000 cost, COG will sweep the board at the forthcoming advertising awards, and debate over its inspiration is already raging. Was it the board game Mousetrap, or was it a little-known Swiss animated film? Either way, who'd have thought all those trendy advertising execs would get so excited by humble transmission bearings? Who do they think they are? The MG Owners Club?
Back then to the question as to whether or not off-roaders are quite as safe as we think they are. We merrily trundle along in our 4x4s, towering above the traffic around us, quite happy in the belief that we're perfectly safe in our tough, mobile fortress. But riding so high, are we actually as safe as we think we are?
American figures would suggest not. In fact, you might be just one swerve away from disaster. Despite the fact that when a car collides with a 4x4, you're better off in the 4x4, overall, the death rate in off-roaders, or SUVs as the Americans class them, is worse than for ordinary cars. So how can that be? Well, American statistics show that SUVs are more likely to roll over than ordinary cars. Surprisingly, there isn't a reliable test to measure a car's tendency to topple. There are standard tests involving a variety of turns and circles, but it's not clear how they relate to real-life situations. Manufacturers still rely heavily on the gut feel of experienced testers to check for stability. The American Road Safety Agency has an index to predict how likely a 4x4 is to roll over. It's based on the height of the car's centre of gravity and the car's track, the distance between the wheels. They rate cars from 1 to 5 stars, the more the better. The American versions of Toyota's RAV4 and Honda's CR-V get 3 stars, and the US Jeep Grand Cherokee gets 2. But these ratings don't take into account important variables such as the softness of the suspension or the stickiness of the tyres. So what does it take to roll a typical 4x4? What does it take to turn a motorway journey into a whirling white line nightmare?
Well, of course, it's possible to roll any car, whether it's a 4x4 or not. If you hit a ditch or a curb at the wrong speed, the wrong angle, you're going to go over.
But there is one place where a car and a 4x4 react very differently, on a nice piece of flat tarmac.
Imagine you're cruising down the motorway, 70 miles an hour, suddenly the car in front brakes. You swerve one way, you swerve the other, and however good a driver you are, with no stability control, you're going to spin out. And as long as you don't hit anything, you'll come to a perfectly harmless standstill, a bit shaken maybe.
And even when I drove the saloon faster and faster, all it would do was spin.
So, what would happen if you're in a 4x4.
To find out, we bought this ordinary Range Rover. Quite an old one, but there are many on the second-hand market. We hired specialists to equip it with a rollover cage, racing seat, full safety harness, safety fuel tank, and, to give you a driver's eye view, a shock-resistant camera. We also brought in a professional stunt driver, Julian Spencer, who, with a few basic precautions, was prepared to put our 4x4 to the test. And, as even we didn't know ourselves what was going to happen, we had an ambulance and a fire crew on standby, just in case. Again, a simple motorway simulation, but now at just 45 miles an hour. Suddenly, the car will brake and the 4x4 will need to swerve to avoid a rear-end impact.
Tiff had found it impossible to roll the car, but our stunt driver found it easy to roll the 4x4.
And remember, this is at only 45 miles an hour. Imagine what would have happened if Julian had been doing 70. For Julian, it was just another day in the office. For 4x4 drivers, a shocking image of what might be. If it hadn't been for the rollover cage, the damage would have been even worse. But of course, the latest 4x4s have come a long way since this old Range Rover. The latest Range Rover has air suspension that lowers the car and its centre of gravity at speed to improve stability. And, like the new Volvo XC90, stability control to cut power or apply brakes when you're likely to get into trouble. Added to that, more car-like suspension without a separate chassis improves the handling of many 4x4s, including this BMW X5.
There's even talk in the future of systems to prevent you steering too sharply for a car's equilibrium. But I'm not sure if I'd fancy that if I was heading for a tree.
Plus, there are already better curtain airbags to protect passengers in rollovers and stiffer roof structures that resist rollover impact.
But whatever they've done to improve 4x4s, I still wouldn't try this sort of emergency avoidance test in any of them. Their centres of gravity are simply too high. You may think you're safer in a 4x4. Me, I'm not so sure.
Of course, ours wasn't a proper scientific test, but surely that's the point. We need one.
Next week, I'm driving the new Peugeot 206 GTI 180. Is it finally a proper hot hatch?
And I'm driving Aston's final attempt to make a decent DB7. This week on Fifth Gear, graceful slides in a DB7 and whiteout in Iceland.
Good evening. It is a mild spring evening and all is well with my world. But if I was to get into one of these funny metal things driving past, I would magically change from a reasonable, even-handed human being into a nutter. What is it about driving cars that can make us so terribly, terribly angry?
What the fuck? In lane!
in the middle of the road.
And you, mate. Get out of it. Well, tonight we're going to try and help make the roads a calmer place. We're not getting mad, we're getting even with road rage. It's not a media invention. In Singapore, dealing with angry motorists is part of the driving test, and a recent European survey showed road rage is on the up. The Spanish prefer verbal abuse, whilst the Germans like to tailgate, with millimetric precision, no doubt. In Italy, you'll see a lot of wild gesticulations. And in Portugal, well, they just sit there bored, flashing their lights. But apparently the angriest nation is our own. 80% of people in the UK admit that at some time or another they have been unable to calm their climbing tempers. And you can understand it because I have done it, and I'm sure you have too. You're sitting there, very calm, and then there she is. The antique Blue Rinser in her old Metro. The geography teacher in his Rover 25, or that old favourite, the psychopath in his BMW 3 Series. I have, and I freely admit it, often given them all both barrels. But rather worryingly, not everyone leaves it at a bit of right language. Us Brits are the ones most likely to resort to aggression and violence. Now, we've done some research on road rage and come up with some pretty harrowing stories. Listen to some of these. He engaged reverse and started revving hard. He swerved in front of me and approached, wielding a length of 2x2. This is the best. He rammed me and put me in a 20-foot ditch. No, this is the best. He leapt out of his car and put his fists through the windscreen. It's not funny, it's frightening. And Fifth Gear are going to do something about it. Join us in a moment as we prove it is possible to stay calm behind the wheel as we try to reform a serial road rager. And trust me, you wouldn't like him when he's angry.
With all the recent fuss about James Bond and his Aston Martin Vanquish, not to mention tantalising glimpses of a new baby Aston, everyone seems to have forgotten about their best-selling model ever, the DB7. Launched in 1993, its almost too pretty design has been going down a storm on both sides of the Atlantic ever since.
I have to confess, though, for me, it's never quite hit the spot. It's never been quite focused enough to match the sheer driver involvement of the best from Stuttgart and Modena. Even with the arrival of the 420 horsepower V12 Vantage model in 1999, it still lacked that certain wow factor.
And as far as I'm concerned, the old girl can quite happily slide into a dignified retirement. Aston Martin, however, have other ideas. Take a look at its latest and perhaps final evolution, the DB7 GT. Exterior changes have been kept to a minimum and include a lift-reducing boot lid, a pair of understated bonnet vents, plus bespoke 18-inch rims and racing-grooved Brembo brakes.
But given a price tag of £105,000, will it now be good enough to tempt me away from a 911 Turbo or even my favourite 360 Modena? Well, apart from the flashy pedals and the odd GT logo here and there, little has changed on the inside, which means it remains rather lacklustre. Made even worse on this particular car by this rather dubious chocolate-coloured interior. The fact is, there's just too much Ford switchgear on show for a car of this class. Indeed, I think the only things I do like are the gear lever and these rather sexy dials. But that's not what we should be concentrating on with this GT version. What we should be looking at is the extra 15 horsepower plus a bit more torque from the tuned-up V12 engine, which isn't a lot, to be honest. Plus there's firmer damping, a shorter final drive ratio for the 6-speed gearbox, which now comes with a slicker change, plus some subtle suspension changes. And the only way to see if they actually make any difference is to subject them to the full rigours of the Nidell testing process. I've already learned that this DB7 is still a fairly soft, wallowy car. And OK, it's got those Brembo racing brakes to help stop it, but nothing will stop that rear end breaking away when you try to get the power on the road. OK, I've got the traction control switched off, but there's no limited slip differential, so in the drive, the inside wheel was just spinning away. It's better. I mean, there are little tweaks, but I think it's a bit more of a mild publicity stunt than a serious conversion. And this wet conditions, it's almost scary. I mean, the V12 engine is glorious underneath you, and every little bit of extra power helps. It's not really that much different. Oh, brake, stop, brake, second gear, turn, quarry, give it some power, and then, oh, just try. Oh, it's a lot of fun when you get used to it. But I don't think it's quite the finely balanced chassis that one would like to have, the sort of thing that you get from Porsche and Ferrari. Sorry, Aston, you need to try harder to fool me. So, as far as I'm concerned, fun though it can be, it is perhaps time for the DB7 to be laid to rest.
We're talking about road rage and have come to Doncaster, a perfectly normal town full of perfectly normal people. We've come to this perfectly normal terrace to meet the owner of this trusty red Fiesta. 29-year-old Rob Hughes is an account manager, a placid, civilised member of society. But by his own admission, he becomes a monster when he drives. Girlfriend Annabelle witnessed one of Rob's biggest red mist moments just a couple of weeks ago.
It was raining very heavily. Then this car came hurtling up behind us and his lights were flashing at you. And then you started slamming your brakes on because you just went mad, didn't you?
He undertook, and as he was undertaking, sort of swerved in towards us. Quite a lot of swear words sort of exchanged and hand gestures.
I remember saying to you, just chill out. I was just like, it doesn't matter, it's raining, stop, slow down.
All I was thinking about is I could see him in the distance. I was plotting his demise. I was willing him to hit the lorry he was tailgating.
He decided to try and ram him off the road by swerving into the side of him.
If he'd have spun off the road, even evil as it would be, I would have probably stopped and had a laugh at him. I've never known myself reacting in the same way anywhere else other than in the car.
We wanted to see exactly what it was that wound Rob up. Seemingly, he was massively sensitive to bad drivers. He even has the "How's my driving" numbers programmed into his mobile phone.
Yeah, I mean, learning to drive is great, but why do they learn to drive them so slow? Police cars that do 50 miles an hour in the inside lane. Come on, stupid. Come on, you blonde, not just blind. So. Stupid. Just when I was in a good mood as well. With this car, it's 400 quid. Most damage I can do to it is 400 quid. It's tempting to pile into them.
Clearly Rob needs some help, so we turn to Europe's leading motoring psychologist and behavioural troubleshooter, Conrad King. He thinks road rage stems from the car's status as the ultimate weapon.
If you want to kill someone in this society, the easiest way to do it is with a car. You don't have to look them in the eye, you don't have to know them, you don't have to care about them. All you need to do is just stop concentrating or lose your temper for 10 seconds. And when you chuck someone in a car, you give them that ability to kill easily. And that's going to change your personality. So you get this feeling of power, this feeling of freedom, you can go anywhere, do anything. and then someone else does something on the roads, and that takes away your feeling of freedom and power. And traditionally, countries and individuals have gone to war to protect their freedom and power.
So how are we going to tone down Rob's warlike instincts? Well, after a quick bit of bonding...
And let's face it, there's a lot of people out there that probably deserve a good kicking, including us at times.
Conrad decided that what we all needed to do was to go shopping. We needed to establish how Rob maintained his cool in everyday life.
And what's astounding here is we've got, hundreds and thousands of people vying for space. There's no traffic lights, there's no routes laid out, and yet there's no conflict. An old guy stalls in front of them. The two of them wander around. I mean, you can see from the body language there, the two of them are completely relaxed, particularly him. And that's with somebody stopping dead almost in front of them. If that had been a driving situation, it'd have been on the horn and wishing him dead. Again, I mean, here's a classic case. You've got someone in a wheelchair, they're having to slow down. You've got someone elderly, they're able to move between them with no fuss whatsoever. If that had been an equivalent driving situation and a disabled driver had been going too slow, he'd have been wanting to do unspeakable things. Here we've got a situation where the woman in front has actually put a card in a couple of times. She's dawdling. Now on the road, he'd be getting frustrated. Here, he can actually see he's dealing with another human being.
And that's the key. Here we're dealing with real people, whereas drivers are dehumanised because they're in a car and so much easier to get angry with. Plus, when walking, you subconsciously give more room to those around you, and a check step or quick smile diffuses any potential conflict. The trick now is to transfer that mindset next time Rob straps himself into his Fiesta. Join us later to see if the retail therapy has worked.
Hello and welcome to Iceland, where the 4x4s play free!
Now in Britain, off-road entertainment usually involves fields, random sheep and mud. But in Iceland, they drive up glaciers for fun. In 4x4s that are so highly modified, you can run over your arm with impunity. Now that's trick suspension.
And I'm still alive!
I joined a group of Icelanders tackling the most extreme expedition drive the country has to offer. A trip up Europe's largest glacier, the Vatnajökull. We took the long way round to get there, a 250-mile trip on Iceland's only coastal highway. It was an expedition in itself. You run into sandstorms that can strip paint off a car in minutes, and then round the next corner you're plunged in minus 10 degrees and snow. The expedition organiser was a proper Icelander, with a proper Icelandic name and Muppets accent, Magnus Ragnarsson.
It's great because when you travel here, you can just turn a corner and you're in a different country almost. You have a new setting of lava or a green valley. It's just the textures are great.
Now, you may have noticed that these aren't standard 4x4s. The stock item would be no good at all on a glacier. So these have at least 12 grand's worth of jacked up suspension and huge low pressure tyres. All that means that these 3-tonners can literally float on snow. Trouble is, progress on the road is slow and bumpy because they can't make these massive tyres perfectly circular. And it didn't improve much when we started to climb into the mountains.
We've come off tarmac onto wobbly gravel roads. Oh, the tyres have gone down to 10 psi. It's like driving on jelly, because the tyres are so huge anyway. We are actually heading out into the fairly serious bits. There's virtually no steering feel, and you're driving up a cliff about to get onto a glacier, where they'll drop them down even further. It's quite weird, to say the least, if you're used to driving road cars. Okay, so we've come along the blue bit, which is the sea, along the beach, up through the brown bit, which is a bit of the interior, and now we're on the base of the glacier, which is the white bit, hence my rather fashionable baby grow. And we're about to head up to the top, so I'll best go and get ready.
With tyres down to their 3 psi minimum pressure and the temperature down to -27, we set off to make the 8-hour trek from the base of the glacier to the active volcano that marks its highest point. Like Scott of the Antarctic, only fatter and less clever.
It's like driving over a piece of paper. You just can't see anything.
All the Toyota Land Cruisers we were driving were different, but the star of the show was this baby, the Polak, a car that's been to both the North and the South Poles. How cool is that?
The Polak has got a giant fire on the front. What he does, he just drops it down. So when he was going across the poles, if you drove into a crevasse, it gets stuck on the other side. So the crevasse is like that. Puts this bit of metal on, drives into the crevasse and just gets stuck so he can pull it out again. That's Icelandic technology.
See, the theory of snow driving is just to keep going. That way you float on the hard layer that's at the top of the snow. If you get stuck, you have to roll back till you find hard snow or get dug out. And when you're going, it's gravity-defying stuff. But it is very slow. And even slower because you do get stuck rather often, like every 10 feet. In all that white, you can't tell whether you're moving forwards or backwards. It's like travel sickness, but without the promise of relief if you stop. And then the weather got worse, Icelandic hardcore style, and we started getting tyre problems.
Alright, we've been going down the glacier, and our tyres, which are running really low PSI, have come off the rim and wrapped itself around the axle. Now we're trying to fix it, but we're in the middle of a blizzard. We can't see anything at all, and I just don't think we're going to make it to where we're going. It's a bit of a disappointment, but my God, this is harsh.
The tyres back on, but even Icelandic determination was no match for the worsening weather. This was a whiteout with attitude, and much scarier than it looks. We were still miles from the top of the glacier, and there was another problem to contend with. We were running out of diesel in a couple of the trucks. After 13 hours of battling, we reluctantly decided to turn back. The mighty Vatnajökull had defeated us. The Icelanders were devastated. I was, well, rather relieved.
I'm knackered. Everybody's shattered. I'm not sure about this adventure lot. Doesn't seem to be much fun.
But going down wasn't as bad as going up. We followed our own tracks and it only took a couple of hours to get back off the glacier. Next day, we found a smaller glacier with the right kind of weather and the right kind of snow.
Gas, 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 gas.
It was big fun. We may have been thwarted in our attempts to climb Vatnajökull, but I'll be back.
We're back with road rage and have taken Rob Hughes, a man who drives close to boiling point.
Is she on the phone? Yeah, is. Stupid cow.
And tried to reform him. Our car quack, Conrad King, has told Rob to treat other road users with the same patience he gives dawdling pedestrians in the high street.
Right, and if you want to just stop, turn the engine off. Right, before we drive anywhere, you've got to decide how you want to drive. So how do you want to drive today?
Well, courteously would be a good start.
It would be a good start. Getting your mind right before you even begin a journey is vitally important. It's much easier preventing road rage than curing it. Conrad's second tip is to do with not placing such high expectations on other road users' skills.
There are millions of idiots out there on the road, and you have to do some thinking for them. You've only to retain your sanity. When you're kind of wanting them to do stuff perfectly, they're not going to do it, and you're always going to get annoyed. You're always going to get irritated.
The third important thing to do is give people plenty of room. It's impossible to be cut up if there's a big gap in front of you.
So here, you've got someone indicating there, because you're not 10 or 15 feet behind the green car, there's plenty of space for them to get in. and you're not feeling like, oh, you should be telling them off. Plenty of space, even when you come to a stop, leave plenty of space. In theory, you know, if the car in front breaks down, you want to have space to get round it.
Yeah.
Or if you're really paranoid, if the car in front is full of South American terrorists, you want to be able to kind of speed away. But fortunately, you're not quite that paranoid. Give us another half hour.
Well, we did, but his paranoia didn't increase, and South American terrorists didn't turn up either. In fact, everything seemed to be going well, despite the rush hour, tricky roundabouts, and a school at chucking out time. Not once did Rob reach for his horn. He even started giving way to oncoming traffic.
Probably would have tried to have a go at making that one.
Yeah. And you got one wave out of two, and you'd have
Yeah.
probably got a wave off the blonde if you'd have waved at her first.
Ah, so there are benefits to being courteous. But then the ultimate test. We all tensed as a white van loomed large ahead on a direct collision course. Surely he'd reach for his horn.
Come on, that white van was in the middle of the road, and you didn't even blink.
I saw him come in, sort of anticipating it's in a white van, and make allowances.
Making allowances? What? No swearing? This is a new Rob. It seemed Conrad's advice had got through. Fingers crossed, he won't forget it. Of course, we can't all carry a psychiatrist around in our glove box, but we can all learn to count to 10.
So the next time the twerp in the Transit or the Burke in the BM cuts you up, or worse, don't rise to it. Don't get angry, just stay calm. They're not worth getting stressed about.
The next instalment of Fifth Gear is a car chase special on Monday at 8 o'clock. Joining us will be Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, James Brown and Madonna. Don't miss it. This week on Fifth Gear, we'll be celebrating the bits in films and TV shows that a car nut like me looks forward to the most.
The bits where the acting and dialogue takes a back seat.
The bits where the real action starts. Yes, we'll be celebrating car chases. Going behind the scenes of the most amazing car chase ever filmed, looking at how manufacturers are using car chases to sell cars, and celebrating the TV show that made British car chase history. But first, Vicky.
You may not have read about it in the newspapers, but a new war has broken out. Engine capacities have rocketed, torque curves have been shattered, top speeds have been smashed, and 0 to 60 figures have been slashed, all in the quest to find the world's greatest super hatch. And this is what they mean by a super hatch, the new Alfa 147 GTA. What sets it apart from other fast hatches is that it's packed to bursting with power. 250 horsepower from a throbbing 3.2-litre V6. Not only does it look gorgeous, but it sounds and feels like an Italian worth twice its £22,500 asking price. And it's fast. It'll top 150 miles an hour and do 0 to 62 in 6.3 seconds. But Alfa's not alone in building ridiculously powerful hot hatches, because whilst Volkswagen has been busy making middle-aged and sleep-inducing Golf GTIs, they've managed to find time to create that. It may look like a Golf, but there's no Golf badge in sight. VW want this car to be known simply as the R32. Like the Alfa, it costs $22,500, comes with a 3.2-litre V6 engine and does a comparable 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6.6 seconds and 153 miles an hour. You get a set of 18-inch alloys packed into an all-new body kit, and to make you feel special inside, you get some dapper, hip-hugging sports seats and lots of standard kit. But That's enough about the superficial stuff. I'm here at Silverstone, and it's time to see how these super hatches square up on the track. Both cars have the same price, similar engines, and almost identical performance.
But the biggest difference is that this car has a front-wheel drive chassis, which is fine. But you've got a whopping 250 brake horsepower going through the front tyres. And the front tyres also have to steer. So it's all just a bit too much for this car to cope with. Oh, lots of understeer. If you boot the throttle in a straight line, you get an awful lot of torque steer, the wheel sort of snatching away as the front tyres try to get grip, and that is not a nice characteristic. That said, if you can get all that power down in a nice progressive fashion, then this car is a lot of fun. Golf isn't front-wheel drive, it isn't rear-wheel drive, but it is a four-wheel drive, which means that you can lob it into a bend, pretty much plant the throttle, and the thing will get out the other side without too many heroics. The 6-speed gearbox does feel just about as nice as the Alphas, but it does have a shorter throw. The brakes are equally as good at stopping the car, and they have pretty much a similar feel. What more can you want? Well, a lot more, actually, because this thing lacks soul. It is powerful, it is very competent, it is very, very good, but it's not alive. It doesn't really give me a thrill. For goodness sakes, I'm here at Silverstone, and I am bored. The R32 is the best Golf we've seen from Volkswagen for a few years, but as I've just found out, it lacks spirit, which is something the Alfa has in buckets. Yes, it's front-wheel drive and it is flawed because of that, but when compared to the Golf, the 147 GTA is the better super hatch.
So back to car chases, and for the first part of our celebration, let's go back in time to 1975, a year that marks the start of car chase history for British homegrown television.
The Sweeneys celebrated the tough side of 70s London with hard-nosed coppers Regan and Carter.
Theirs was a world of flags, dodgy rugs, shooters, and, of course, cars.
And the cars in question were always the same.
The villains always made their getaway in a slightly down-at-heel Jaguar S-Type. Regan and Carter always chased them in a Ford Consul or in later series of Granada. Viewers loved this exciting new type of telly.
Nobody had ever done this kind of thing before, certainly not in this country, and very little, actually, in Hollywood. Health and safety was, these were two words not understood or even known in those days.
Who taught you to drive? Evel Knievel?
We used to just do it in the street for real. There were ladies with shopping bags and there were car chases going past them and people doing handbrake turns in front of Sainsbury's.
OK, now look, Fangio, you've done your Brands Hatch number and I'll get back in the bloody car.
Quite often we would swing in and out of the public. I mean, that would save the company money because they didn't have to pay the other drivers. And half the time, if the police car was marked as a police car, they thought it was a genuine chase anyway, so they would pull over for us. And that would be sort of down Putney High Street or Fulham High Road or wherever, you know.
We used to make the police look the other way. We used to buy them a drink. I mean, literally a drink. I don't mean that we gave them a brown envelope with some stocks and shares in it. What I mean is they actually came and bought them 2 beers because they didn't have 2 pennies to rub together.
In a groundbreaking early example of product placement, Ford happily supplied their cars.
Of course, they got fantastic coverage, especially they're always chasing and usually beating the Jaguars. And of course, for the stunt driver or the chase driver, they're ideal. They had V6 engines, 2.5 litres, 3 litres, plenty of torque and grunt. no limited slip diffs, so the inside rear wheels would spin away like mad with plumes of tyre smoke and lots of drama.
Yo, Bill, where'd they come from?
Shut in. Throw a left in and stop.
Now, all the Crims drove Jaguar S-Types because they were fast, cheap and plentiful, and because there were so many around, they were common. So the police wouldn't think there's anything weird about 4 blokes in an S-Type with some shooters and a bag of money. Now, this S-Type is a pretty sporty number. It's got a 3.8-litre engine, which is good for 220 brake horsepower, and that will get you up to a top speed of 120 miles an hour. There's something about this classic British posh saloon car that's been corrupted by the criminal fraternity, which makes it feel special. It makes you feel like doing something dodgy.
But the producers had to buy their Jags.
Most of the cars were recycled because we didn't have the money to get new ones, which is the reason why you will see those cardboard boxes used, because it didn't damage the car.
And the Fords had to be returned intact as well.
So, if you've got to give it back at 4 o'clock, and we did, you know. I mean, it sounds mad now to a filmmaker now, they just laugh. But we used to have to get back by the end of the day, you know. Then you'd be very careful not to... And if there was a scratch on it, there'd be a guy there with teacup going like this.
Hey, Cooney, do you have to polish the car now?
But at the end of the day, the odd Jag was... dispensable. That then was the world of television waking up to the wonders of car chases. The public simply loved them. They couldn't get enough of seeing Regan and Carter being thrown around in the backseat of their Ford Granada. So it's rather surprising that it took the world of marketing 30 years to catch up. Car makers, led by BMW, are now using the car chase to sell cars. In a remarkable series of 8 short films, BMW have made their cars into car chase heroes. In each of them, Clive Owen plays the driver who's forever getting out of sticky situations. And starring alongside him are big names like Ray Liotta, Don Cheadle, Gary Oldman, Mickey Rourke, Madonna, not forgetting James Brown and Marilyn Manson.
I'm trying to read.
Crucially, BMW chose to distribute the films not on TV but on the internet through a special website. You see, trying to advertise new cars is a tricky business. With more and more channels, it's becoming ever harder for the car companies to make sure they actually get through to their prospective customers, especially as we tend to flick channels as soon as the adverts come on. So the marketing men have found a new way of cutting through, by not hoping we happen to see their adverts, but by making us actively seek them out.
It's going to be okay.
You have to help me, please.
With 40 million internet viewings, BMW's strategy seems to be working. And there are other benefits. TV adverts are governed by strict rules. You can't even hint at speed. But because these films aren't for broadcast, you can show speeding, power sliding, and all sorts of law-breaking action. Now, if you say to BMW, surely this is all a bit irresponsible, they'll simply say it's just a way of demonstrating the brand values of what they call their ultimate driving machines. Big-name directors have been lured to make the films, and each has brought their own style. Ang Lee's kung fu film background shows through in this tightly choreographed car routine. The late John Frankenheimer, who made Grand Prix and the car chase classic Ronin, filmed, guess what? A classic car chase. My favourite, though, is Guy Ritchie's film. It has plenty of black humour, as you'd expect from the man behind Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, plus brilliant driving and his wife, Madonna, who bears the brunt of the laughs. There's one sequence just here where the actor, who maybe seems to be actually driving here, flings on full right-hand lock and then lets go of the wheel totally, and the steering wheel begins to correct itself. We then cut outside to see the car in a fantastic power slide, and I've heard of this technique, but
Never actually tried it myself. The effect is stunning, if that's how it was done. And then we move on just a little bit further to see another special effect. There's another power slide where the camera seems to be glued to the front of the car. Here it is now, and again, this was actually done with a camera mounted on the bonnet, and they've actually artworked or probably computer graphic the mounting out. The effect is certainly brilliant. The only problem is, when the car is on opposite lock, you cut then on board the actor with positive lock. So I suppose you can't have everything, especially when you've got Madonna in the back. BMW aren't the only people using internet films to sell cars, though. Nissan has just closed the centre of Prague to film a high-speed chase to market their new 350Z, and even sober-sided Mercedes have tried the idea with their Lucky Star film. So what next? Well, the new 5 Series film doesn't have a chase in it, as they're giving us a rest for a while they dream up something rather special for their next new car, the 6 Series Coupe. But what sort of car chase could you make with an unlimited budget? Join us in a moment when we find out by entering The Matrix.
There are 3 things you need to know about The Matrix. 1. Written and directed by the reclusive Wachowski brothers, it was the biggest grossing movie in Warner Brothers history. 2. It rewrote the rulebook for special effects. And 3. The recently released sequel, Matrix Reloaded, has the most awesome car chase we have ever seen. You know you're off to a good start when the opening action sequence has a bike, a babe, and a bang. I'm in.
Watching them make it was extraordinary. All the stuntmen that were involved, and you know, they had like 3 cars flying in the air at the same time, 18-wheelers crashing through cars, people on motorcycles being chased by cameramen on motorcycles. I think it's pretty cool.
Being a girl, you know, with action sequences, I just thought that it was it really drew me in. You know, most of the time in action movies, I'm like, okay, enough already. But with that particular scene, I was just kind of glued to the screen and couldn't take my eyes off of it.
Me too. I mean, we'd seen the storyboards. The whole thing about The Matrix, it's pretty much all storyboarded, so you can get a pretty good idea of visually what it's going to be like. But when it's actually up there on the screen, it's amazing.
The chase sequence took 1 year to plan, 7 weeks to shoot, and lasts 14 minutes. They built their very own 1.5-mile-long freeway, the biggest film set in movie history, a construction overseen by production designer Owen Patterson. A huge machine extruded concrete sections, whilst the walls are simply painted plywood that could easily be cut through for emergency access. Everything was designed down to the last road sign, down to the last piece of litter.
Down to the dead ant.
Yeah.
You know, in the gravel.
Was that ant there?
Yeah.
Continuity?
Yeah.
Although the movie was filmed in Australia to save money, the chase was made in the USA, where it's much easier to source plenty of left-hand drive cars, and, of course, stunt drivers.
We were having a drinks, dinner, get to know each other, and there was like this group of all these young guys who were doing kung fu and wire work. And then in the back of the room, there were these old cowboys, and these guys were just like still, big belt buckles, Levi's, you know, looking like they're from the 50s, hard boys. And I was like, who's that? Excuse me, and they're like, those are the drivers. And I'm like, ooh.
Those stunt guys take hard hits, man. They're strapped in so they can hardly move.
and they take some really
They
hard
do.
hits.
Tim Rigby,
Amazing.
Tim Terrell,
Yeah.
thanks very much for taking all those hits.
Many of the drivers use roll cages to their own specifications. It's rumoured they got through 300 cars thanks to some pretty destructive manoeuvres. For the most life-threatening stunts, computers digitally mapped routes for the vehicles and even the driver's footwork. Everything else was rehearsed using an attaché case full of toys.
Everything is timed down to the last minute.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of metal moving at 60 miles an hour, you can't afford to have any mistakes.
One of the trickiest aspects is getting 200 extras to try and drive the other cars in a realistic-looking random pattern. Although some did get a bit carried away, didn't they, Lawrence?
Yeah, one of the guys, you know, got really happy and took a car for a joyride. Came around a curve and saw one of the police cars sitting there stationary. Thought it was the real police, and smashed up the car.
Sadly, Carrie-Anne Moss can't be with us tonight because she's heavily pregnant. But her riding of the Ducati against the flow of traffic was definitely our favourite bit. And yes, she did do it herself.
Oh, the chase on the bike is extraordinary. It's just bananas.
It's pretty spectacular. I mean, for her, it was very brave. I mean, to ride a Ducati 996 with someone on the back with no helmet, and, you know, and you're not a motorcycle rider. It's pretty full on, you know. The stunt coordinator, R.A. Rondell, he just started with small bike, bigger bike, until finally she was on that high performance machine. Bravo, I mean, it was great what she did.
A meticulous route was plotted with the black blocks on the road representing the outlines of computer-generated cars. Add in some remarkable camera angles and the sequence is frankly breathtaking. Come on! So, Keanu, you're a biker boy. Did you have a go?
They'd let me sit on it, but they wouldn't let me drive it around.
Unlucky. The others saw plenty of action. Carrie-Anne Moss, Lawrence Fishburne and the Raymond brothers all went to motion picture driving school for 3 days to learn a few basic skills. But why is the Matrix full of Cadillacs?
You know, we went to them and they said, you know, do you want to help us with this chase, GM? And they said, well, you know, Cadillac really needs to spruce up its image a little bit and kind of do something that's a little hipper and younger. How about taking Cadillac in this thing? And then the boys went up there and went to Detroit and looked at the new line of Cadillacs and saw the CTS and the XD, and they said they kind of look Matrix-like anyways. Let's do that. Now, when we looked at them, they were only in prototype form. I mean, they didn't even really exist yet, the cars. They had to actually build them for us.
And what did they do with all those lovely new cars? Write them all off. Perhaps the most complex shot of the chase sees a bad guy landing on a bonnet. It's the ultimate blend of old-fashioned skills and modern technology. The jump is computer-generated, but the carnage behind is done for real. Drivers hit pipe ramps that are being towed by the vehicles in front of them.
There's a lot of things that go on behind you don't realise. So on that kind of a shot, you've got lots of cameras covering lots of angles, but, you know, I'm stuck in this car fighting Morpheus, and I've got all this carnage going on behind me. But when I'm filming it, because I'm acting and the camera's mounted in front of the car, you can't see what's going on, and you'll get the odd bit of peripheral vision and a tyre bounce past you or something.
That explains the noise.
Good job I didn't see it. I would have probably just ducked, you know.
Right, that's enough about the movie. Fifth Gear had just enough time to ask the big names, what's in your garage?
I ride Norton Commandos.
Really?
Yeah, I love them.
For years, I've been driving in a Suburban. I mean, that's the car that, you know, is like a truck. That's what I have a guy who drives me because I'm on the phone and I'm yelling too much, so I'm afraid if I'm driving myself, I don't know what'll happen. But I did just try to make a deal and buy one of those Maybachs, the new, it's a pretty cool car. I was pretty impressed with it, so I think about maybe, now that the movie's a big success, maybe I'll drive around in style.
That's all for this series, but we'll be back in the autumn with the most glamorous new cars in the world.
Plus some bigger crashes, louder bangs, and more spectacular wallows. See you then.